Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Welcome back to another stream. Alright, Kyant, how do I actually pronounce your name? Hopefully I get that right at some point. Levelvit, welcome back. Earthmine, nice to see you all again. Mortis, Without Horns, Bella, Dave, Eldegusto, Zionis, Elden Enthusiast, Hilko, Scowleasy, welcome back everybody. A lot of names in chat already. Okay, so yesterday we went ahead and looked at the trailer for the DLC, and then we watched like 3 videos total that were not just the trailer and our analysis of it. So today I figured we can continue to look at some more Shadow of the Erdtree content, starting off with Zoie the Witch's trailer analysis. I haven't seen this. I don't know if Zolie talks. I'm pretty sure it's all just text on screen, so I'm very curious to see how this video is formatted, and especially with like any data mining insights Zolie may have, I'd be very curious to see as well. Zionis, thanks for continuing your membership. Oh wow, 3 years. Holy crap, has it really been that long? It's kind of mind-blowing. Thank you so much. Okay, Bob Sinclair, welcome in. So after Zolie's video, I figured we can watch Mysteries in the Shadow of the Erdtree trailer by Bandit Games, which I had queued up yesterday as well. Then the Lore Hunter's take on the reaction and impressions of it. And depending on how much time we have left, Mad Luigi's Messmer's Past and Miquella's Plan, Elden Ring DLC lore, and then Ever Baron's The Shadow of the Erdtree theory that nobody is talking about. And then in the text on it, it says, is this the Crucible? And we did talk about that briefly last night. So hopefully that'll go into some more detail that we can either agree with or quibble with endlessly into the wee hours of the morning. More lore, nice to see you again. Oswald Bell de River, welcome back in. What's the lore behind the stream being in 720p? Is that intentional? The lore is good old Last Protagonist's upload speed is pretty hot garbage. So 720p is like the way that I can maintain the most stable thing. Because I fairly regularly can only upload for stream at like 2600 kbps. When, yeah, that's pretty not great to say the least. So 720p for the stable time. Yeah, I mean, I've considered just like hard recording all of my streams and then like uploading them live, but that kind of gets really annoying with like the storage capacity and then like the double notifications to subscribers and whatnot. So I only do that sometimes if my internet cuts out like really, really badly. But yeah, I didn't tell you I was streaming last night. I told everybody. All right, so that's what we have on the schedule for tonight, and depending on how much time we have left over, I have also thought about, just for laughs and giggles, potentially doing an Elden Ring GeoGuessr. Why? Okay. Because apparently this is a thing. I actually had an idea of making a video of like an Elden Ring GeoGuessr, but apparently like it's already a thing, so I got beaten to the punch like a long time ago. So yeah, just a potential time-wasting activity I've got in my back pocket there. All right, and then the other points of order that I wanted to bring up yesterday on stream, I had referenced using Evie's spreadsheet, but because I think I just like looked at my history, I think I must have just clicked on a version that I made a copy of rather than posting the original link in chat, so that was definitely my mistake there. And so I've already pasted the link to Evie's text comparison spreadsheet in the chat all the way up at the beginning of the chat if you guys want to see it right here if you wanted access to that specifically. It's also in the resources on the Discord and all that good stuff. And then the other thing is I did lower the gain on my mic, so hopefully it's not nearly as crispy, because I went back and listened to it and that was a lot more crispy than I intended. And if I ever do have like audio issues, I definitely appreciate if you guys like point them out, even if they seem to be a bit nitpicky to you. I'm kind of nitpicky about it myself, so I'd prefer to know than to not. So yeah, no problem. You're welcome for the sheet. And Solar of Kurland, welcome back to the stream. Oh, YouTube didn't. Yeah. The notifications are kind of wonky on YouTube, which is why I also like push the Discord, because I try to make an announcement when I do go live. And like Discord's weird as well. Like after changing my server to like a community server, like not everybody sees the announcement channel automatically. So you need to go into your settings, but I do try to ping everybody. So at least there is some redundancy if you're so inclined. All right, Doggo Doggo, thank you so much, and welcome to the stream. Yeah. So yeah, if you are having issues with announcements, I would recommend going to... Or I won't worry about that right now because I'm getting distracted. Yeah. I need to fix the gain first. Yeah, because part of my worry about the gain situation is that it'll just be like way too quiet in relation to the video, or people like really have to turn up the volume on their devices, and that just kind of sucks. But I mean, this is kind of as loud as my mic goes apparently, so I guess we'll just have to deal. So I think if I'm still peaking, we're just gonna have to deal with it, and this could just be like a natural consequence of the headset microphone situation. Otherwise, I might just need to figure out something else entirely later on. But thanks for letting me know. Okay, yeah. Scalise said you went to the server settings and toggled show all channels. There you go. Okay, so with all that being said and done, once more for the 1000th time, welcome on in, everybody. Let's go ahead and dive on into Zoie the Witch's Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree trailer analysis video. Oh, maybe I should like read this stuff out loud, huh? Oh, get distracted. I forgot to enable Nightbot. All right, let me back up entirely. She don't talk. Yeah, I gotta read it. Yeah, I kind of went on autopilot mode, looking at other stuff. As expected, it seems the DLC will center on Miquella, with his withered hand taking the player to the land of shadow. Miquella is described as being loved by many, but also being able to compel affection, giving it a slightly sinister angle. That would have been a really funny like pun if this is Miquella's left hand right now. It's his right, because like sinister equals left. Anyway, as such, the player evidently isn't the first to take this path, following not only Miquella, but several others seeking him. In an interview, the DLC has been stated to be larger even than Limgrave, and the trailer seems to show various locales. But also it's said to have denser and richer level design, with field areas, legacy dungeons, and something in between. Oh no, the lands between? As seen previously, the landscape is dominated by two trees coiled together, with the central tree cracked and leaking sap. And I mentioned this on stream yesterday, but like some of the vibe that I get of this tree, it almost seems to be like literally embracing this one like a person would, but yeah. Anyway, my brain got ADHD hijacked because when I said a person would, I'm like, oh no, it's a tree would. I made a pun. Anyway. While the central tree may be some reflection of the Erdtree, it's unclear what exactly the tree coiled around it may be. Miquella's presence brings the Halig tree to mind, and notably the Halig tree does have a second trunk, though it's broken. It's also possible that Godwyn's death root is spread even to the Land of Shadow, with Miquella struggling against it. Oh yeah, I can't believe I didn't think to bring up that theory at all with the trailer analysis yesterday, or even like the other videos. Yeah, this is a pretty popular theory. Maybe I'm just kind of like making that up. I mean, it seems like a pretty plausible theory that if like Deathroot was infiltrating the roots of the Erdtree and whatnot, maybe is also infiltrated like the Land of Shadow, because if the Erdtree is kind of in two locations, why can Deathroot? There is a kind of like spire type thing going on with Godwyn's corpse here, which is kind of hard to make out. It just kind of seems a little bit what's the word? I don't know. Give me a second. Let me pull up some footage. All right, I don't remember which one was which exactly. Okay, no, this is perfect. Okay, so this is like the continuation of the death root that's literally sprouting out of Godwyn. Because like when you're in the game, you can't pan your camera up that high, but it's all like coming from his back. And you know this is Deathroot because it has like the tendrils, it has like the eyes in it and everything. So it's just one gigantic ass death trunk, which is really cool. Scalise says, if bigger than Limgrave sounds small, just remember how huge Limgrave felt when it was new. I think like one difference between like Limgrave and what could be the Land of Shadow is that Limgrave is pretty open, whereas it looks like the Land of Shadow is much more dense. So if you think about like how long it kind of takes to traverse around like the Gelmir region, you could have something comparable to that within the space of like Limgrave, and that could be like a lot of content to actually go through. Yeah, as Dago says, it's in Farum Azula, the Deathroot, which isn't really connected to everything, so it's kind of weird. And there's like a lot of theories that could like try to justify that, in that Farum Azula may have actually still been part of the lands between like main continent before the shattering, and then something could have happened after. It could have been struck by a meteorite, and that might be why it's in the air. But like even that reconciliation still just kind of like leads to other issues with trying to place Godwyn facing the Stormlord and all of that. Yeah, Levo remembered when the closed beta test started and everyone was thinking how Limgrave was incredibly big, even though it was like a quarter of its size. Well, yeah, that's true. And I remember like being 40 hours of like hard game time into the game and not even feeling like I was halfway done, which was true. And I had pretty much just like fully explored Limgrave, Weeping Peninsula, and I was like getting into my Divine Tower of Caelid shenanigans. Although, to be fair, I did crash pretty hard against some bosses, and that probably ate up a lot of time. So, like I said, I reset like probably 200 times against the Grafted Scion at the beginning. It took me a decent while to kill the Tree Sentinel, but not like something too crazy, I don't think. Then, I think, yeah, the Crucible Knight was probably another boss that I struggled against, but nothing like the other two. And then when I went to the Divine Tower of Caelid, I was only like level 40 or 42, and that Godskin Apostle down there just absolutely murdered me for hours. I actually like gave in and upgraded my bandit skeletons because I was tired of them like literally dying in one hit. Level 40 is too high. Yeah, I know, only like 39 levels too high, right? Doggo hasn't even fully explored the Halig Tree or Mogwin. Oh, you don't need to worry about that. Just take the games at your pace, and if people want to give you crap about it, I mean, it's just kind of playful ribbing most of the time. Just try to not let it bother you too much. Okay. But the winding serpentine nature of the secondary tree may have some other implications with imagery seen in the trailer. Interestingly, the sky here resembles a veil like the one over Marika's bed, which may tie into Miquella's link to dreams. Oh yeah, this is probably like, maybe not the best example of a baldachin, but yeah, this is another popular comparison point, that the veil here is similar to that found here, which I forgot to mention on stream yesterday. Pre-ordering the DLC awards the Ring of Miquella gesture, which resembles this rune, suggesting it's a sign of Miquella. Okay, so we seem to be on the same page about that. Naturally, it looks like there will be multiple new NPCs with a wealth of new weapons and armor available for the player. I really like this armor set. It just kind of reminds me of, what's his face? I actually remember the NPC's name. I'm thinking of the wrong NPCs. Like, the first name that popped into my head was Kirk, but like, no, it's not Black Iron Kirk. It's not Black Iron Sorig. It's Black Iron Tarkus? Tarkus, right? Yeah, Tarkus. Lap. This man seems to appear later in the trailer, and his brooch is vaguely similar to Gideon's icon or some of Saint Trina's imagery. Yeah, maybe I should pull up the Crozier, because I don't think I actually did that on stream yesterday. Where are we? I don't know if I have a good picture of it on its own. Oh, this will suffice. So I don't think it's like exactly a one-to-one parallel by any means, but just like the overall design elements are very similar, I think. So they could ultimately be different, but yeah, that's just kind of where I am now. Hey, Aaron Weiss, thanks so much for the 5 again. People who say Miquella will be like Griffith forget that Dark Souls subverted a lot of fantasy conventions. Let our boy be a good boy. I mean, Griffith wasn't always bad, was he? The blue flower field is already Mortis's favorite FromSoft area, and it's not even out yet. Just wait until you find out that the blue flower field is just like a swamp in disguise. Oh no. Okay, here we go. The woman beside him wears robes slightly resembling Fia's, which could point to her also being a deathbed companion. While the DLC may be roughly one region, the areas shown look quite varied, and of course there's a poison swamp. Mortis don't care. In particular, this location seems evocative of Raya Lucaria, with similar decoration and even using glintstones for light. Yeah, so this area almost feels like a cross between like the Carian study hall and almost something like you'd see down in Nokron or Noxtella. Like, if this was a chair crypt instead of like a random whatever it is, it would definitely give me the vibes of what you get when you pick up the moon of Noxtella, but it's not, so oh well. And even the clothing of the man inside, it looks somewhat close to the scholar depicted in the Carian inverted statue. So is this supposed to be a man? Maybe it's because of the clothing, but it seems more feminine to me. But yeah, I guess we'll, have to wait and see. Yeah, so this is something I pointed out yesterday. I didn't have like a good close-up, so I'm glad Zolie has it readily available here. And like I said yesterday, I also think it's kind of reminiscent of the Dectus priestesses designs. I'll back up. Like, I think it's kind of similar to these things, but it's obviously different. And these things don't really seem like normal Erdtree priestesses. So I think they're supposed to represent part of the union between Radagon and Renala and Raya Lucaria and Leyendell. You think that's a mask, or... Scott brings up an interesting idea, and that you wouldn't be surprised if the Carians hung upside down to get the blood rushing to their heads so they could think big thoughts. That's almost a bit surprising that that hasn't been depicted in some way in a FromSoft game. The Wicker Man full of burning bodies is part of the Celtic myth, but also appears in Berk, so it's no surprise to see it here. Oh yeah, the Berserk one's pretty close. For me, something about this design resembles this unused Demon Souls enemy, though they're more likely unrelated. So I'll be real, I think like a lot of the enemies in FromSoft games are just repurposed previous designs, and FromSoft just kind of like works on what they want to work on. I think the Banished Knights are dead ringers for like a cut enemy in Bloodborne. I'm gonna try to like look up a picture real quick. Okay, sweet. Oh, it's way gigantic. All right, so I think this dude is like a proto Banished Knight, especially with like the little dragon on the helmet. And obviously, like, did I say Dragon Knight? I meant Banished Knight. Do I have a good picture of a Banished Knight? No, that's just the Greatsword. Okay. Oh, no, I do. Okay, this dude. So, obviously different enough that it would pass like the high school plagiarism test, but close enough that you could definitely see repurposing of things. And then you've got like the old skeletons for things like the Capra Demon or the Taurus Demon essentially being the Erdtree avatars, stuff like that. Or not Taurus. Asylum Demon being like an Erdtree avatar. All that kind of fun stuff there. Farron slugs are Valley of Defilement slugs. This slug looks like a slug. Dragonite is cooler? Okay. Shupa, welcome on in. Makes you think of Bloodborne, something the Healing Church would make people do. Like going upside down, yeah. I was thinking of the Hanged Men, which is a huge motif in Bloodborne. Butts from Skirk. Were they Canehurst Knights? Allegedly, but I mean, it's cut content, and it seems to be like early cut content. If so, it would make a lot of sense for them to like follow that so-called King of Canehurst, which is like the King of Death or like Dead King, whatever you wanted to call him in the cut content there. Yes. As Bella said, in the fishing hamlet, I'm pretty sure I have a picture of it readily available. In Bloodborne, it's one of my favorite like little environmental details there, that the little parasites, if you want to call them that, can be used for like whale fat purposes or just like oil purposes. What did I call it though? That's the issue. Don't remember what I labeled things even. Oh yeah, and then of course Windows search is just not returning literally anything. I have no idea what's going on with this. Like my Windows search feature seemed fine earlier this month, but like this week I've noticed it's just not actually looking for the things. Anyway, I would pull that up if I could find it, but I can't do like a real quick Windows search. Yeah, anyway. Okay, I'm going to move on from that. You don't know how Windows search is this bad, but it is. Like, okay, way back in the day, Windows search used to be like instant and fantastic, and they made that crap terrible. I think starting like Windows XP, or maybe it was Vista, because I really hated Vista. And then it's kind of been at a standard level of not great, but this past week it's just been like literally unusable. Like it's not working for me at all. Okay. The horns and lion-like face of this boss feel potentially related to omens or misbegotten, but its anatomy is slightly suspect. If you look closely at certain frames, it seems there are several bodies beneath its robes with distinct visible arms and legs. I like the little MS Paint going on with it. If it's one entity, it may have been an anatomical mess like the Royal Revenants, but it could just be a group of people in a costume. Definitely a group of people in a costume. And I also just like really like that design. I used to play League of Legends, and like one of the only legendary skins that it had was like the Lion Dance Kog'Maw, because it's just I don't know. I just really like something about that design in general. Let me like look up a picture for it. For anybody who may not know what I'm talking about. All right, so yeah, this is Lion Dance Kog'Maw, and it's just like a little guy. But anyway, I'm really excited about that boss, for as silly as it is. The Collector's Edition refers to this as Messmer the Impaler, whose flames are said to have set the land of Shadow ablaze. His reptilian eye may show him as having partaken in dragon communion, but overall he seems more associated with snakes. Messmer seems to have many small wings, but it seems they're all connected to his snakes rather than his body or his armor. Are they? I would need to like double check. Cause like this one is weird. Yeah, I don't know. I guess, yeah, okay, I see the snakes or the wings coming out of like the bottom snake. That's a little bit more clear. Okay, yeah, I can see that. Although I gotta say, and this is completely irrelevant, it looks like he's got like some poop soft serve snakes on his helmet. Like this is just kind of like a wonky design. So enjoy that mental image as you play through the game. Importantly, snakes are described as traitors to the Erdtree and the duelist armor, and this specific wording may be relevant here. So this is something that I've harped on a lot, and it's kind of funny that it like comes back up into relevance here with like the DLC stuff. Let me just pull it up for you guys. Oh, where are we? Oh, that's the furled finger. Okay, here we go. So the duelist helm, as was just on the screen, says the snake is viewed as a traitor to the Erdtree, blah, blah, blah. The Japanese for it is, okay, Hangyakusha. And if you like want to look it up in a dictionary like Jisho, I don't know if Jisho is going to be the best resource. Okay, yeah, it's kind of okay. I mean, it could be better, but that's just kind of the nature of working from like a Japanese to English dictionary rather than just like the native Japanese dictionary, which I'm a fan of. So, oh, come on, man. Okay. Oh no, that's wait, why did it? Oh, it's because it just like filled it in. Maybe. Okay, so maybe it doesn't have it directly. Let me double check. Maybe I was just blind. Anyway, okay. Anyway, I'm not gonna worry about that too much. So the Sha character just means like a person, essentially. So if you go like Hangaku, you got treason, treachery, mutiny, rebellion, insurrection. And this is kind of true. Wait, did I not look this up? Oh yeah, I just did. I'm just kind of blind. Having a moment here. Yeah, it's kind of like more in the sense of opposition. So like, well, it can cover the meaning of traitor within certain contexts. It's more like like what I compare to is like the Star Wars rebellion. So like nerds rise up, but I would say like technically speaking, the rebels to like the Imperial Empire and whatnot are technically never part of the Empire in a certain sense because they like never agreed to it. Although I'm certain the Empire feels differently themselves, and that's kind of what I think is going on with the snakes here. In that. Once the Erdtree arose, the snakes and their faction may have like opposed it, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they were part of it, like turn their back on them or like stab them in the back. So that's just kind of like one nuance, which I think might be relevant later on, and who knows, maybe like they will turn out to be full-fledged traitors later on, but that isn't entirely what it means. So. And then John Paul Cochran, welcome back to stream. Nice to have you again. Scaleezy thinks he's related to the immortal serpent god of Volcano Manor somehow. And somebody was mentioning, I think in the chat yesterday, or maybe it was in the comments after the fact, that they were wondering whether or not the spear that is used against Rykard could have been like used against the forces of Messmer in the past. Maybe they didn't say that directly. I'm just not remembering super well. What about Datakar? Are we going to learn any more about that character? The reason why I laugh is just because I think of like the Cut 1.0 description with Datakar being like Rykard's former lover, and that just kind of like being cut content. So I kind of doubt it, but who knows? Snakes wanted an independent state, or at the very least, they may have wanted to keep their independence, which I think kind of like can be paralleled in some aspects to the ancestral followers, which is, I guess if that's the case, it's kind of interesting that the snakes are stigmatized more specifically than like the deer and whatnot. So maybe the snakes were just like more direct opposition to the Erdtree, whereas like the ancestral followers just kind of left. Because there is that one spoken echo of Marika where she tells people to like pretty much go Marika's way or the highway, and if they didn't want to join her, they could just be powerless upstarts at the fringes, which I kind of think is what happened with like the ancestral followers. But yeah, anyway, if the serpent slaying spear worked against Messmer, that'd be hype. I highly doubt it, but it would be pretty cool. Yeah, as Pigsy says, Traitor implies they were on the same team, but from the Erdtree's perspective, everything is supposed to be under its purview, so not accepting the rule of the Erdtree could be seen as betrayal. Yeah, that's kind of fair. So that's kind of like why I just want to like recontextualize this, just because I I don't know, I'm pedantic about that and can't let stuff like that go. Messmer is the don't tread on me snake, confirmed. Indeed. Being a traitor rather than an enemy implies they were allies, and so Messmer could have betrayed the Erdtree in some way. And yeah, this is a fair reading, but it isn't quite set in stone, so I'm not like too upset for going on this tangent again. In an interview, Miyazaki refers to him as a child of Marika, and his red hair likely implies his father is Radagon as well. I don't actually know. I would need to double check all of the interviews, but at least from the first two that I saw, like the day the trailer came out, I don't know if another one came out. I don't think he explicitly said that he was a child of Marika as much as he was on an equal status as them, which, I mean, could Radagon be considered a child of Marika if he's kind of essentially non-literally, if he's figuratively born of Marika? Is this literal? I don't even know anymore. So he could be like a previous aspect of Marika. Not that I really believe that. I'm just kind of like spitballing here with like the whole situation. But anyway. As this would put him on par with Melania and Miquella, he may have been an Empyrean chosen by a set of two fingers. Hey Necropolis, welcome on in. And given his snake theme and how Miquella's blood grew the hailing tree, he could even be responsible for the coiling tree. So that's kind of an interesting idea. I don't think I've heard that one yet, so... I'm just kind of like thinking about the possibilities of that with the hailing tree like being raised on blood. Is Zolie trying to suggest that the shadow tree is also raised on blood? And if so, is it raised off of Messmer's blood specifically? Or could it potentially be the blood of the enemies he's been impaling? I think that could be a really cool image for sure. So I'm just going to have to see how that all plays out. Scaleezy asks, did the Erdtree ever bear fruit? Because they could pull some forbidden fruit stuff and have Messmer eaten it, which caused his banishment. So that's kind of like not ever explicitly stated, because if you want to consider like a golden seed as part of a fruit in a way, I don't exactly know the differences between like fruits and seeds and like nuts or legumes. I don't exactly know the differences between them. So, and this could be like an issue of you using fruit a bit like liberally here, because bearing a fruit could be used figuratively to mean like having seeds, i.e. like golden seeds, or like literal fruit as in like apples or oranges, or potentially even more figuratively with the whole idea of its sap being its blessings. So I think you probably mean it a bit more literally, and if it bore fruit, could Messmer have eaten it? Maybe. We don't have that stuff. We do have the one passage that says that the Erdtree was once perfect and eternal, and thus it was thought that golden seed or that Erdtree seeds could not exist. And so I feel like if they don't believe that its seeds could exist because it's perfect and eternal, then it probably didn't bear fruit. But I'm also of the opinion that when it was perfect and eternal, it was later on in the timeline and after the Age of Abundance. So it's arguable. TLDR. Dover B definitely believes he's a child of Marika. Yeah, I definitely think it's a very strong possibility, but the interesting way in which Miyazaki answered the question kind of indirectly just kind of gets my gears turning there. And then Without Horn says the minor Erdtree guardians have flowers on them, so maybe the Erdtree does make fruit. That's an interesting point as well. And I guess the question is, are they actually supposed to be Erdtree flowers, or are they something else? Hey, howdy, welcome back to the stream. Solanthropist says, just because it's eternal doesn't mean it can't spread, though. Oh yeah, I agree with that to an extent. I think, though, that when the Erdtree was made, eternal had to have come later in the timeline, specifically because we're told of it being fleeting at one point. And I believe the idea of the Erdtree being fleeting would contradict an Erdtree that is perfect and eternal. And I covered that a lot on my latest video about the grace of old and everything. Levo says, for them, it's the red hair proof that Messmer is Radagon's child, or how else can he be born with red hair? That's a very good question, and not to like throw too much gasoline on the fire here, but I suppose you could ask yourself the same questions about the misbegotten, the fire giants themselves, and or the Radagon, the red wolves of Radagon, or the Radagon wolves as they're called, like in Japanese. And Mortis says, as someone with red hair, Radagon is not your father. Alright. It's also noted that Messmer was part of the history written by George R.R. Martin, so references to him may exist already. And that's kind of been somewhat soft confirmed by Miyazaki. Between their blonde hair, the tangled horns, and their gray skin, these enemies seem possibly connected to the lion boss. Anything connecting omens and dreams may also tie into the horned evil spirits haunting the nightmares of omens. You know, that's a good point to bring up, that they haunted the nightmares of omens, because that's not something I'd considered in the whole, like, macrocosm of lore here. New weapons and spells appear, as well as returning concept like an unarmed melee set close to Dark Souls 2's Bone Fists. This roar looks like certain dragon incantations, but instead calls for something more like a horned bear with red fur. Oh yeah, and that's like another one. Is this red-haired bear related to Radagon? I do know that some people like kind of unironically posited that as a possibility, and I don't like want to come across as mocking it or anything, but it just kind of shows like that there could be other possibilities, but we don't know. Yeah, and a lot of people, as Levo says, believe that this could be a Crucible incantation because of like the budding horn style design coming off the bear itself. Alicia Register, welcome on in. TA called the second tree wrapped around the first tree in the DLC trailer a strangler fig as an example of parasitic trees. Yeah, and I guess I should like pull up a picture of the two. It is questionable whether or not they're the same kind of tree. I think there are enough visual differences where someone could argue that they're probably different trees, but I don't know. It's almost May, we're so damn close. This overlap could tie into the theory that rune bears may be taking on aspects of dragons seen in their slitted eyes. And they also kind of have like gravel stones coming off their chests. I think Zolie probably has a video showing that off, but I know I've like talked about it as well. The woman in red seems to be a player model, so this could be showing an actual new character or just a new armor set. With the DLC's snake focus, the woman's dance-like attacks could relate to Tanith's history as a dancer from a foreign land. She could also be a reversal of the Blue Dancer who taught Millennia's mentor, the swordsman who sealed the Scarlet Rot. And what was I going to say? I just kind of blanked out for a second. Let me look back. Oh yeah, Tanith. So I wonder, like I kind of doubt it, and I will be disappointed if they don't expand on it further, but I think it'd be super cool if more gets added with like Tanith's so-called quest at the end of the game, because with her just like eating Rykard to kind of like absorb him into her, I think that's metal as hell, and I'm just kind of like disappointed that's where the story ends, because it seems like there could be an epilogue, so to speak. All right, there we go. Amusingly, this Boar Rider loosely recalls armored tusks from Dark Souls and even an unused Boar Rider concept art. A screenshot from the Steam page seems to show the player using this Hippo Beast quill attack as a spell or weapon art. And you can find these on the Japanese site as well. Whatever this bizarre skeletal creature is, the horse it's riding looks to be either emerging from muck or dissolving into it. Not to deal too much psychic damage to the chat, but it's just Atreyu, y'all. This is the man from the painting seen earlier, attempting to tear some large thorn or branch-like object out from his body. One of the last things we see in the trailer is Miquella himself gesturing towards the coiled trees above the land of shadow. As Melina may not be present due to story progress, Miquella may be acting as a guide throughout the DLC in her place. Let me think about that. I guess, yeah, Melina could still technically be around for this DLC. I hadn't really thought about this specific issue because you don't need to go directly to the Fire Giant's kiln to go fight Mohg and Melania, but it's just kind of like an easier route of progression, so it makes sense to do it. But yeah, she could be around. Man, I'm going to be so like upset if nothing gets expanded upon Melina and our situation with her in any way in the DLC, but anyway. Howdy asks, what's that creature from Scottish folklore? And then John Paul says, Kelpie as well as Scalazy. Yeah, it is kind of reminiscent of a Kelpie now that you mention it. Oh, you're thinking, Mortis is thinking of the Dullahan? Whatever the Orcadian horseman is based off of. So Dullahans tend to be headless from what I understand, or maybe they just like hold their head. I guess its head is kind of missing in a way. Maybe? Yeah, I could see it being like a Dullahan and or its steed being more like a Kelpie. If she's still alive, they might give her a line about how she can't follow us for whatever reason. Maybe. Pigsy hasn't done the Forge yet for the DLC for that reason. Scholar likes Melina is Messmer theory. Scalazy wants Spirit, Melina, and Miquella following us around and just talking off on the side the entire time. Oh no, and then like little doll Ronnie can join them. Of course, it's also possible Miquella may feature as a boss, whether as himself or as Saint Trina, partly echoing Radagon. The trailers created a lot of room for speculation, but we'll naturally have to wait a while now to see if any of it's right. Thank you for watching. Sub if you'd like to see more. In the meantime, here's some other videos. So that was a pretty good video. Definitely brought up some points that I may have forgotten or didn't consider. Like the whole Omen connection to Nightmares was a pretty good one that I appreciated. So go ahead and give Zolie a like and sub if you haven't, if you enjoyed it. And yeah, what else was I going to say? I had like a cursed comment in my hip pocket, but I kind of forgot it. Oh man. Was I gonna say something like? Anyway, I'm drawing a blank. I don't know if I was gonna say something about like Ronnie and Melina and Miquella, or if there's something else. So anyway, we'll just go ahead and move on into the next video with Mysteries in the Shadow of the Erdtree trailer by Bandit Games.
Guys, red alert!
Okay.
Guys, red alert, the brand new, highly anticipated Elden Ring DLC trailer just dropped. And don't worry, Bandit's here to break it all down for you. Also, you may notice that this was already
Let me know how the
uploaded
volume
earlier
is
today and then
for
taken
the videos
down.
for you guys.
That's because I found all of the interviews that held additional lore information, as well as the website description, that changes quite a bit of my initial thought processes after I went live with the initial trailer analysis. Guess I was just being a little too diligent breaking it all down after it dropped.
Okay, I remembered, and I didn't pay any attention to this because I was in space. So, I was wondering if like the whole Sekiro style mechanic could relate to Miquella specifically, and whether or not like that has to potentially relate to that whole idea of Dream Brew. For anybody who may not know, like Dream Brew was a cut content legacy item where you'd like creep up on sleeping enemies and like snatch their dreams and like make alcohol with it essentially, and then you'd like be able to give it to NPCs, kind of like Sekiro style. So while I didn't necessarily think that had anything to do with the DLC, I wonder if that would be a way to artificially gain that so-called offensive power that Miyazaki talked about in the Famitsu interview. This perfect night. Nice. Thank you. Kudik, welcome on in, and Ezekiel, welcome on in. Have I seen the Cosmos analysis of the trailer? No. I've literally only watched like 5 videos, and they've all been on stream. His vid's great? Okay. Yeah, somebody else recommended it, or maybe it was you. So maybe I'll have to add that to the list.
Trailer analysis. Guess I was just being a little too diligent breaking it all down after it dropped, forgetting to scour the internet for other sources of information. The updated trailer breakdown, considering all currently available information, is as follows. The trailer opens with a shot of an unknown character facing away from the camera. At first I thought this could be Melina, but the robes and boots don't match exactly, leaving me to assume this is an unknown new character since it's unlikely it's the player character as they show them off later in the trailer wearing all sorts of different armor. We also
I could still imagine this being the player character, but them just trying to make this visual like more interesting. But yeah, I guess there is the possibility that it could be anybody, for all we know.
Have a voice line most likely from this individual, which actually does mean that it could be Melina, but more on that later. This individual is facing the very spot where the new DLC area will take place, or at least where it will begin. The throne room of the Mohgwyn dynasty, where Mohg stole his little half-brother Miquella away and entrapped him within a cocoon, only revealing his withered arm jutting out. A narrator begins speaking and says the words pure and radiant. He wields love to shrive clean the hearts of men, most likely referencing the new villain of the Realm of Shadow known as Messmer the Impaler, which we will visually see and discuss a bit more later on. To shrive means to hear a confession and absolve sin by assigning a penance. Then the narrator says there is nothing more terrifying, which puts a
just to also build off of that, shriving, at least in the context of Dark Souls, is also used to take away weapon infusements, weapon enhancements, whatever. So yeah, that doesn't contradict this dictionary definition whatsoever by any means. But I just wanted to point out that there is kind of like a little kind of nice FromSoft history with that word. So anyway.
Sin by assigning a penance. Then the narrator says there is nothing more terrifying, which puts a very dark spin on Messmer's judgments, meaning he is either cruel to those he would cleanse or merciless. After a cut to black, we open to a shot of the new Shadowlands realm that we will be transported to upon touching Miquella's arm in the DLC, which, even after researching the interviews with Miyazaki regarding the DLC, is still a complete mystery as to how it was created and how it ties into the lands between directly. We know it takes place in the same universe and was at one point connected directly before being disconnected somehow. The website details the Land of Shadow as a place obscured by the Erdtree, where the goddess Marika first set foot. A land purged in an unsung battle, set ablaze by Messmer's flame. It was to this land that Miquella departed, divesting himself of his flesh, his strength, his lineage, of all things golden. And now Miquella awaits the return of his promised lord, which I can only assume is either you, the player character, or Mohg, I guess?
How funny and messed up would it be if, he actually was awaiting Mohg? That'd be kind of wild. You think he's talking about Miquella, not Messmer in that quote? Oh no, he's definitely talking about Miquella with the shriving thing. Howdy says, you think the guy with the heavy accent at the beginning of the trailer is the same guy who is in the Cut St. Trina quest? I'm trying to remember what voice that was, because I know the dude who did the voice for Yura seemed to have a lot of lines read for other unrelated characters, like the nomadic merchants, or maybe they're 2 different people, but they sound very similar. And so I kind of wonder if some of those lines were just kind of placeholder lines. Mohg will win in the end. Mogan Lord.
One of the biggest questions I have after reading that is when Miquella left to the Land of Shadow, and if Miquella is in the Land of Shadow, is this, just his empty body or something? We don't have specific answers to this stuff just yet. But back to the trailer. The player character zoom.
And then Pixie had a good question that kind of tied into what Bandit said here. If the Land of Shadow is created before the Shattering, would there even be runes there to level up? What would the point of a maiden be there? Those are all really good questions. We don't know if there were finger maidens or even 2 fingers, 3 fingers, 4 fingers, 5 fingers here in the Land of Shadow. So we don't really know, but I think it's been more or less confirmed from Miyazaki that we actually have literal sites of grace in the Shadowland. So even like setting all that stuff aside, if the Elden Ring like kind of governs the laws of the universe, I wouldn't be surprised if the idea of like runes existing beyond the physical lands between, that wouldn't surprise me in the least. So I could still imagine us getting runes, or maybe we don't get runes, and that could potentially tie into the whole like separate power dynamic of the lands of Shadow. All right, Howdy, you have a good night, and thanks for joining as always.
Zooms past on Torrent with this new city in the distance and gallops towards it through a field of ethereal tombstones. And I can only assume this is indicative of Messmer's judgments and what he does to those he deems unholy. Perhaps he kills them and their dead spirits are trapped here in this world as some sort of penance. We see the ruins of buildings indicating civilization and strange plateaus and cliffs in the distance that have what could be roots sticking out of them, similar to the Sky Islands of Tears of the Kingdom, which heavily implies that these land masses were actually raised out of the ground, calling further into question the physical nature of the Land of Shadows. We are then given one of the most eye-catching shots of the entire trailer, which contains many additional raised land masses with interesting structures on them such as bridges and Greek-looking architecture, similar to Mohg's palace,
and to like build off the point that he was making with the upheaval of the lands and whatnot, some of these bridges are broken, so this one is definitely, like, maybe it could have been raised, but it's definitely lower than where it should have been. So maybe this all should have been raised. Maybe this landmass over here should have been lowered for it to align properly. So it definitely makes sense with what he's pointing out here, which I also talked about briefly when I was looking at the trailer with you guys yesterday on stream. And then Pixie brought up a good point that you can have a rune as a keepsake from outside the lands between when you start up the game, which is a fair point as
well as the new bleeding giant tree in the distance that we've seen since the reveal image. Not only do we see more clearly that this tree does not look visually like the Erdtree, which was much more straight and narrow and, well, quite frankly, glowy, but we also notice here that there are giant drapes of light flowing down from the top of this giant tree.
So I don't think that's fully fair. If anything, I would just say that this one is slightly more tilted as an Erdtree is concerned. I guess like maybe the top, like, it is probably bent and you can't really see it because of this. But anyway, I would say like the actual Erdtree, which is analogous to the one that you see in the lands between, is kind of similar, but just more extreme.
Spreading throughout the new Shadowlands. It could be that these drapes are hiding this new world away from the rest of the lands between, and that due to touching Miquella's hand, we are given access to what lies beneath them, although it could all just be within Miquella's mind as well. Also, I feel like we should mention that it's entirely possible that this great tree is actually not the Erdtree at all, but is the Halig tree, which just so happens to be a great tree that Miquella created in defiance of the Erdtree and the Golden Order, which we have explored in the game but never actually seen fully from a distance. It's also positioned in the far north of the map beyond the mountains in the shadow of the Erdtree. If this is the case,
you can kind of see the Halig tree from a distance in this section of the what's called Altus Plateau, like the windmill area. I know it tends to rain here a lot, and even if you do look at the Halig tree from this location, it tends to be obscured by like mist, so you don't get like the best of images, but you can still kind of see it. I think you can also, no, I think it tends to get like out-rendered by the fog when you look at it from like the Gelmir area. But anyway, Millicent also like looks over here, probably because it's the closest point to the Halig tree from Altus Plateau. And also it's kind of like a direct straight line for Millicent to go from the abandoned coffin area towards the Halig tree, so that's kind of why she ends up here, in my opinion. So
far north of the map beyond the mountains in the shadow of the Erdtree. If this is the case, remember, the Halig tree was created with Miquella's DNA. The substance leaking out might literally be Miquella's blood fused with tree sap. But this is completely speculative and could still be the Erdtree, just the
And something that's worth thinking about with that idea is, let me pull it up. The Lord of Blood's exaltation. Render up your offerings of blood to your lord. Drench my consort's chamber. Slake his cocoon's thirst. His awakening shall herald the dawn of our dynasty, as Moog would say. Probably with a little bit more liveliness than I did. But anyway, to slake his cocoon's thirst, I don't know if this is just like a Moog delusion or if it's like an operative command given to him by Miquella, whether or not Miquella needed other blood. It's kind of weird because like if he's watering the Halig tree with his own blood, it would almost seem like he shouldn't want other blood to do it. So I have like conflicted feelings about it. I tend to think it's more of a Moog delusion than a Miquellan commandment, but who knows? The huge tower looks awesome. Reminds you of Lord of the Rings. All of the pot imagery shows that the Erdtree is actually a bonsai.
Shadow Realm version, or another great tree entirely, such as the ancient tree called the Great Tree that we can read about in Elden Ring's lore. After this, we are given several shots of what I assume will be either new characters or, more likely, new bosses coming in the DLC. The first of which is a knight who is wearing a new set of armor not before seen in-game, facing away from the camera towards what appears to be a great rune, but it looks much more cohesive and neat and functional than the great runes of the Elden Ring. But who knows, it could just be part of the new rules and presumably new runes that this land operates on. The next shot is of a female character wielding a large sword and wearing golden, form-fitting armor that sports a face on the faceplate. She is...
And I don't think I mentioned it yesterday, but I think the existence of Miquella's rune being outside like the lands between also raises like a ton of other questions. Like, do we have other runes that we don't know about? Is that why it's an Age of Fracture with like the default ending? Is there going to be anything special if you get Miquella's rune? Miyazaki said like the ending of the DLC shouldn't like impact like the understanding of the ending of the base game, I guess, which I think is kind of disappointing, but it kind of makes sense. It kind of goes in line with like all the other DLCs. Like, even though what's it called? The Ring Cities DLC's ending doesn't really affect the ending of the base game. It still kind of does provide a lot more closure for the series as a whole. So we could have a similar situation to that going on, but hopefully, I don't know, man. That's a girl. You thought that was a dude? She seems more feminine to me and whatnot. That rune looks like an eclipse or the moon. What runes did Vike have? If we can connect some dots. We don't know what Vike had. Ronnie's rune is missing in action as well. I would disagree with the notion that Ronnie would have had a rune because she should have died technically before the Elden Ring was shattered, and the demigods allegedly got their shards of the rune because of the shattering. So I know some people think that Ronnie would have picked up her rune shard after the fact, but I'm just skeptical of that personally. Blank and blank, indeed.
Staring off into the distance with some of the new lands and sky visible in the background. Her stance leads me to believe that she may be a friendly new character, but you never know with FromSoft. We then get a new shot of another character that appears to be male, positioned in front of some kind of structure with spiral pillars and holding a pot. Not a living jar, mind you, but a new kind of pot, while another narrator voice begins to speak, saying, "In that forsaken place, blood must spill." The forsaken place assumedly being the Shadow Realm. Then we see another new character, assumedly female, also wearing a face-molded faceplate, lying on the ground face down in a field of white flowers. Before the camera
I just wanted him to say face more times. Alright.
Fades to black, the character moves a bit, signifying they're not dead, but rather awaiting our player character, I'm sure for a friendly chat. Next, we are shown presumably the player character inside some sort of dark church or study hall, with papers and literature and pews broken and scattered all around the place. In front of the character is an unknown individual, sitting on a throne facing the audience. We can see
Alright, so Levo says, you think Ronnie has a great rune because Gideon mentions it? So this is where I would cast doubt on our good old Gideon, the all-knowing's knowingness, in that I think based off of the information that he had, that the demigods had great runes, it'd be understandable to assume that Ronnie would have had a great rune, but he also seemed to be ignorant of the fact that like Ronnie was the one who killed Godwyn and discarded her flesh, because like not even Roger knows about it, and he's supposed to be like a scholar of the thing, so I just kind of assume Gideon isn't fully aware of that situation himself. So he's making a educated guess, or just, a valid assumption that Ranni would have had a rune herself, although I don't think that pans out. And I feel like the game kind of corroborates that, although many people might want to make arguments about like the rune of the unborn in relation to Ranni, and like the weird situation with like Rennala and the sleep and the trap and all that. I think like there's definitely room for argument there. Hey Jack Irish, welcome back to the stream. I think you were here yesterday. What kind of weapon types am I hoping for? Honestly, I haven't really thought about it too much. I've been kind of excited about the backwards wielded like katanas that our boy was wielding when he's like fighting the omen looking like ladies. At first I was really skeptical. I'm like, oh, that just sounds kind of dumb. But yeah, actually seeing it in action is a little bit exciting. I just kind of want more like buff types and like more lore. So like more lore relevant weapons. So like I want more like Godskin stuff. Having more Crucible stuff is like definitely on my checklist of things to want. So looks like we're getting the Crucible stuff. I don't know about like the Black Flame and whatnot, but like all the stuff with like Messmer's Flame and like Destined Death is definitely what I'm interested in. I'm also excited about the sword spear supremacy. Maybe not sword spear, but the lance, like the gravity lance that the hippo rider, no, the boar rider is wielding is very interesting too. You want flintlock pistols, the next version of ballistas? Get that whole FPS action going on with some PC mods. Yeah, Silco says trick weapons. That is definitely okay. That's like kind of like my wish beyond, or like hope beyond hope, in that like they could incorporate actual trick weapons, because I've said this before on stream, not anytime recently, but like going through Elden Ring and seeing the Reduvia like really excited me that like there were going to be different types of weapons that we hadn't seen from any other of the FromSoft games so far. And then when I got to Volcano Manor and got invaded by what's her face, and she dropped Inquisitor Gisa, and she dropped the Girandol, I don't know how to pronounce it. I was like, oh my god, did they actually include like the pizza cutter? Is this a trick weapon in Elden Ring? And so I was thinking like, instead of an Ash of War, if you could trick it, oh man, that would have been like S tier game dev for me. Maybe that'd be too difficult to incorporate with like the right hand versus left hand, but I don't know. But yeah, trick weapons would definitely be like the weapon type that I would want the most. Whether or not it'd be something as simple as like the saw cleaver or like the threaded cane, or if they wanted to do some like more extravagant stuff, I would just be all for it, man. Florbjor, welcome on in. You want to get the sludge horse thing's boomerang? Yeah, that one looks pretty cool too. You often pick weapons for the role playing, even if they're not the best. Yeah, my first time through the game, I was rocking like the Unga Boonga greatswords, and then I switched to the Godslaying greatsword just because like it's a Godslaying greatsword. I mean, how could you not use it? Diamo, welcome on in. Just joined. Is it 100% the DLC entrance is at the Withering Arm? I believe it's been confirmed. I would say like 99% sure, but I'm not fully sure yet. Good question, though. So Philanthropist says, trick weapons will definitely make a return in future games. There's no way From doesn't expand on their greatness. Who knows, man? I feel like I've been saying that like ad nauseum at this point.
Many cages in the room, some of which are human-sized. And with this religious inspiration and the narration piece about Messmer's shriving of the hearts of men, I think it's very likely that this place is a church that's used for said penance, or rather, terrifying torture. We then get a closer shot of the person sitting on the throne, which appears to be female and adorned in a grand collarpiece and robe. They are awake and aware of the player character's approach, and the narrator continues speaking, saying, "The blood of your fellows, the Erdtree faithful," while the camera hard cuts to a new, swampland looking area that the player character, now sporting a different armor set, is galloping through, towards a grand building in the near distance. These fellows who are faithful to the Erdtree that the narrator is talking about are likely tarnished, who are given life anew by the grace of the Erdtree. The narrator...
I don't remember if I like put it out this way specifically yesterday on stream, but like The fact that there's Erdtree faithful in which Messmer and or his forces seem to be in opposition kind of implies to me that the events that are like ongoing within the Shadow Realm seem to be taking place like relatively late in comparison to the timeline of the current game, because like for the Erdtree to exist, like it implies that it doesn't predate the Erdtree to a certain extent, but I think that all gets compounded with the issues of like whether or not this place has been like put in a kind of stasis, or whether or not it's just kind of had an ongoing timeline of its own that's what's the word, that coexists with like the base timeline of the base game, which is going to be very interesting to see how we have to unpack everything with that. Deathblight Swamp. I don't think this is supposed to be Deathblight, but that would definitely be wild. Solanthropist says, Lords of the Fallen innovated by having two-handed into one-handed attacks and vice versa. Yes and no. I think that the way that they implemented it was a lot more seamless than in previous games, but I would make the argument that Bloodborne had that as well. Even Dark Souls, you could always like combo between... Oh no, you're saying like two-hand to one-hand. Yeah, Bloodborne probably did that the best beforehand, but Lords of the Fallen definitely does do that, I think, the best of the Souls-likes that I've played so far. And that is something that I hope like gets expanded upon like further in the genre. Like Lords of the Fallen is like really weird to me because like it's a good game, but it also has like kind of a lot of issues which like really mar its goodness. And in some ways I kind of enjoyed it more than Lies of P, but then in other ways like Lies of P also just has like better systems than Lords of the Fallen. So I kind of just like want a hybrid of like the good stuff from Elden Ring, the good stuff from Lords of the Fallen, good stuff from Lies of P, and good stuff from just like other games in general to just like make it more cohesive. Santeria, welcome back to stream. Wasn't there a bow that mentioned that it was just put together mechanically or something that was made by a talented person? That got you thinking there might have been trick weapons in the game. So that one is the Poly Bow, or like maybe the Full Moon Crossbow, because it's like related to the Golden Order, something along those lines. So yes, but not necessarily a trick weapon, but yeah. Hey Stella, welcome back to stream. Solanthropist says, what are my thoughts on Lords of the Fallen lore? Did I enjoy it? I didn't really get into the lore too much, just because it seemed a bit too... I don't want to say like too bleak, but like none of the endings felt significantly different enough for me to feel motivated to like really want to know the differences between the factions, or like really feel strongly about aligning with one faction over another. So I thought it was functional, and I feel like Lords of the Fallen is kind of marred by having like super obscure like quest steps, kind of like Dark Souls 2 fashion with its NPCs, and it could have been better. I like some of the aspects of having like some of the lore hidden behind like stat requirements. It's kind of cool, but it's also like kind of annoying on one hand. So it's like, if you really wanted to know more about like all of the lore of the items and whatnot, it just kind of incentivizes players to like make a trash build for whenever they want to read the descriptions or go to a wiki. So I think there's pros and cons. I'm not saying like it's necessarily bad, but it just becomes a bit clunky or janky at times trying to decipher all of that. Okay, going back to the video.
Narrator is either talking about we the players needing to go and shed blood and die in the land of shadow, or he's talking about all the tombstones we see everywhere being the tombs of fellow tarnished who have come before us. We are then given a particular shot of a painting featuring an older man, seated, looking worried towards the camera, and behind him an unknown female character with her hand on his shoulder, and with her eyes covered in the grand robes she's wearing, she is most likely a finger maiden to whoever this man is, or whatever the new version.
That's a pretty bold claim to say that she's a finger maiden specifically. Because, yeah, that just like implies like everything related to the fingers as well, but I don't know.
of that would be with regards to the Land of Shadows. We are then cut to the player character walking through a dimly lit dungeon that has countless jars hanging from the ceiling above. And these jars actually are the same jars that the living jars embody that we've seen in the base game, implying that there's some sort of necromancy happening here with the deceased bodies, which is what living jars are made for storing and composed of. We then have a really cool shot of possibly the player inside a man-made dungeon.
And then, of course, we don't know if those jars are made specifically for living jars or if, like, living jars were just kind of like something created from, like, a pre-existing jar system. But setting that aside for a moment, let's just, like, entertain the possibility that these jars are, like, have a similar function as to what's going on in the lands between. It seems like they tended to take the remains of the dead to put the dead's remains, like, next to Erdtrees to either, like, fertilize them or become, like, incorporated into Erdtree burial. And if that's the case, could that system have been utilized in the Land of Shadows? Maybe. She has a maiden. She's a maiden, has fingers. Finger maiden. Got me now. You notice that those chains are the same types of chains on the forge. You wonder if that's important. It could be a case of reused assets, but you might be right. It could be like the same civilization made these two locations. Anyway.
Walking upwards on a giant metal pipe suspended by chains with one end resting in molten lava, implying this entire facility has some sort of function, but we can't really tell what that is as of yet. Then we get a shot of one of the new castle towns in the new world, and if you look closely at the entrance, you can spot the same spiral pillars that were positioned behind one of the new characters revealed earlier. Perhaps this character will be awaiting us at the entrance, possibly as a boss fight, possibly as a little piece of advice. We can also notice that there are floating pieces of debris in the background. Another new narrator, female this time, speaks, saying they were never saints. They just happened to be on the losing side of a war, which may be the female sitting on the throne we saw earlier, likely either speaking about the tarnished that have been tortured and killed, or about Messmer and his followers who assumedly esteem themselves to be saints that have the ability to shrive the hearts of men. I think the part about being on the losing side of a war...
Wait. So he's saying, like, Messmer has that power?
The hearts of...
Well, let me back it up.
And his followers who assumedly esteem themselves to be saints that have the ability to shrive the hearts of men.
So that just seems to be a misunderstanding that the shriving to clean the hearts of men should, I most certainly think, be a reference to Miquella. Maybe it isn't entirely explicit, but yeah.
I think the part about being on the losing side of a war, mixed with the website's information about an unsung war taking place in the Land of Shadow, tells us that it's possible that Messmer fought against the Golden Order and Marika, and he and the Shadowlands were banished because of it.
I think that's a strong possibility, and very curious to learn more about that, because it's like... it almost feels like throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Like, if Godfrey was such a badass, like, why didn't they beat Messmer? Does that imply that the whole Messmer situation was post Godfrey? I think there's a lot of reasons to believe so, even like the whole like Radagon stuff aside, but it definitely seems like something that may have happened later on, like later than Godfrey's reign at least, but I don't know.
Next shot is of a terrifying new boss that also has a fitted face mask that also appears to be living flame animated inside of a body of metal poles held together by chains. There are also horn designs sprouting out from underneath the face mask, which could be representative of Omen, a biological disease from the first game, with religious implications. The next shot is a lovely encounter with a new monster, I'm assuming that can, eat your face. When it rears up, munching away...
Does it have, like, 3 sets of eyes on its head?
We can see the moon in the background. Next, we have one of the most interesting looking new characters to come in the DLC, which is a monster that is composed of multiple human bodies.
Hey, Nectarine, nice to see you again.
Scions of the first game,
the lava factory is where your dad works.
Red robes and armor, and most notably, a giant particular lion-looking head with horns jutting out that also looks very similar to Omen. It also has long, flowing, braided blonde hair, implying that this creature is genetically related to Marika, Miquella's mother, who has iconic braided blonde hair but has also given birth to 2 Omen-laden children before. That, or it's related to Miquella and Moog. The next shot is of Messmer himself, followed closely by a red serpent as he speaks, asking, "Mother, wouldst thou truly lordship sanction in one so bereft of light?" The fact that he's talking to someone he calls mother in this seems to somehow point to Marika being his mother, since she's kind of the mother of all the other demigods, but more on that in a second. The wide shot of Messmer more clearly shows the two winged red serpents hanging all over his body, as he readies a fiery magical spell, which looks very similar to the fire of the earlier boss and stares deeply into our eyes. Also, Messmer's entire appearance, as in the red clothing and red serpents possibly sprouting out of his body and his fiery red hair, all heavily imply connections to the other members of the demigod family such as Rykard, and therefore all the way up to Marika and Radagon. And due to the IGN interview with Miyazaki, we know that he is supposed to be on the same level as the other demigods from the base game. He's even specifically shown to be sitting on one of the demigod thrones in the official art, meaning it's entirely possible that he's actually a long-lost sibling. Perhaps.
So I think Miyazaki says, like, it isn't necessarily the same type of cherries, it's just kind of reminiscent, but it's not too important, I don't think.
Another child of Marika. Next, we get a series of shots showcasing some new gameplay options and weapons and moves and enemies. We first see the player battling some new enemies,
and this is where we've got like the backhanded swords again,
that are holding candelabras and are adorned with horns. Then another shot fighting against an unknown enemy wielding a big...
And I do think like these throwing knives are pretty cool, so that'd be cool to see how that actually works in the game.
Butcher knife. Then we have a shot of possibly just another player character wearing the noble set, but also possibly the return of a familiar face, Roderica, whose fate was undisclosed at the end of the game, who was...
And I guess it's also worth pointing out that the butterfly spell is an incantation specifically, it seems, rather than a sorcery. So yeah, I guess I could see that like working either way.
First seen in the base game wearing the same noble set but with a red hood, now sporting the blue hood that can also be found in the game. She even lost her red hood in the base game and begs the tarnished player character to kill the god Marika who cursed them all. So her being here associated...
I don't necessarily think this is supposed to be Roderica specifically, because you can get the, like, her set seems to be a unique, non-unique set in that, like, it's affiliated with a group of people rather than Roderica specifically, as opposed to something like, I don't know, Gideon's armor or like Loretta's armor being way more specifically curtailed for those two individuals specifically. And if it is Roderica, just like to entertain that possibility, it would be very interesting that she has the navy hood, because as I talk about in my last video, those who were given the crimson hoods had never been issued missions or duties, and that implies, at least with Roderica's case, that she never saw the guidance of grace, whereas those who were given navy hoods had seen the guidance of grace, and therefore they had missions or duties to fulfill. And to build upon that even further, if this is Roderica and she has like a navy hood suggesting that she does have guidance or a mission, that it would be very interesting that this guidance or mission brought her outside the lands between ? Or like outside the current lands between, because I guess like one could still potentially argue that this should have been part of the lands between. I don't know. Where's the green hood, Miyazaki? There's quite a few reaches in this analysis. That's fine, especially because, like, I mean, everybody's just kind of reaching, but I think it's important to like try to point out when you're leaving the ground. But yeah,
with Miquella would make sense. She's positioned in...
Do I think the Confessors were allied with the Two Fingers and Miquella? Not likely Miquella, but definitely the Two Fingers. I guess it does come into question, like, how much Miquella is aligned with the Two Fingers. So maybe, but nothing, like, super explicit about that connection, at least.
In front of some kind of altar out of which grows a very strange looking tree and has lion statues on either side whose faces look very particular, exactly like the lion-faced beast we saw earlier, even sporting the same horns on top. And she's casting some sort of new butterfly spell against some enemies approaching her with daggers. Then we get a shot of another player character kung fu kicking a knight, possibly a Godric or Gelmer or maybe new type of knight entirely, but while still being within the new lands, implying that some enemies may be following you into the new area. Then we get a shot of most likely the player character again hurtling a giant bomb at some approaching enemies, giving us just a little taste of some of the new weapons and tools we'll be able to use. Another shot of a new...
Yeah, I think like the whole Marika, I need to double check the closed beta classes. I think it was one of the starting ones. Closed beta classes. Okay, I found a video real quick.
I want to take a moment to talk
Hopefully this shows it off.
about classes and stats in Elden Ring at level 5. They also had the same stat spend, 87 points in total. I'm wondering how this will differ from the release.
Oh, maybe no Marika.
In the network tests from the earlier games, the selectable classes differed quite a bit from the release. Speed, strength, thus more effective scaling listed in the item.
So maybe she's just kind of like
Released
shown up
its
in
own
some promotional art elsewhere. Yeah, I think it's just like a generic tarnished thing. Because you also get like a Raya Lucarian Knight. What are they called? I guess it's not not the Cuckoo Knight is my point. So they do try to like show off some varieties and builds and whatnot, I think.
New armor set and a new Bloodborne looking crossbow that can rapid fire machine gun style as a new narrator speaks, saying, "I presume you too are keen to know just what kind Miquella is doing here." Which, I mean, is accurate. We all want to know what he's doing in the Land of Shadow and who the lord he's awaiting is. Way to tease us, video game fourth wall breaking character. Another shot showcases some of the gorgeous new cliffsides as well as a new spell that transforms the player character into a giant bear head. Then we get a
Levo says Marika was first shown in the gameplay reveal trailer in 2021. Okay, I thought she appeared elsewhere. John Paul says Blurica uses a Crucible talisman spell thing in a trailer, you remember? Okay. And then I thought there was something else that I saw in the chat. I'm blind. Okay.
a gorgeous sweeping shot of the player fighting against a woman in a red dress wielding two swords in a field of glowing blue flowers and magical blue sparkles in the air. And if you'll remember, implies an influence in magic in these new lands, so there could be other powers at play that we don't know of, possibly with ties to the Carrion royal family. We then see a new kind of sentinel riding a giant tusked boar and wielding a huge polearm that can call down purple lightning, possibly referred to as the Erdtree sentinel. We then see a new monstrous kind of
Wait, what?
Sentinel riding a giant tusked boar and wielding a huge polearm that can call down purple lightning, possibly referred to as the Erdtree sentinel. We then see a new
that possibly is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence.
arm that can call down purple lightning, possibly referred to as the Erdtree sentinel. We then see a
All right, that kind of stuff, like, I don't really like. I mean, I say all the time, oh, I give people the pass when they use like language like that. I feel like that's just like unnecessary hype, or maybe not hype, but like unnecessary speculation that goes a bit too far out for me. Hey, Master Foxfire, welcome on in. Radon's Tree Sentinel, maybe. Yeah, it's most likely gravity. It could be something completely different for all we know, but purple lightning tends to be associated with the gravity spells. Like if you use the Falling Star Beast Jaw thing and use its like Ash of War, you'll get purple lightning come out of it.
new monstrous kind of mole hippo looking enemy or boss that can sprout lots of spikes, presumably as an attack, and another skeletal enemy with no face riding a pale horse and throwing a giant boomerang, a bonerang, at the player that's most likely a new boss, perhaps the combined bones of the bodies left over from Miquella's dark arts. Next we see a sick shot of an undead man pulling out some sort of shard that's been stabbed through his body vertically, taking his head along with it. And if you'll notice, we've actually seen this man before. He's the same man that was shown on the portrait earlier, which we can tell by his stature and the cloak he's wearing, sealed with that particular emblem in the front. This begs the question, though, of what his significance is to the lore, and who the lady is from the portrait and where she is currently. Perhaps she'll be making an appearance in this encounter. Perhaps she's the one who stabbed the man through. A new narrator speaks once again here, saying, "Those stripped of the grace of gold shall all meet death," which...
Just having flashbacks of Sister Frida. We got our like inverse Father Ariandel Frida fight with this one going on, maybe?
which is a clear call out again to the Tarnished from the lands between, who were all famously stripped of the grace of gold. Clearly these people really want us to know that the Tarnished are coming here to die. But I mean, what else is new? In the next shot, we see the player approaching Messmer in what I can only assume is the final battle. He leaps towards the character in a brutal jumping forward attack as the narrator continues, in the embrace of Messmer's flame. When you look up Messmer's name, apparently...
Alright, so you guys are talking about like his voice allegedly being TikTok voice. I mean, I think it's really easy to criticize that aspect of it, and if it annoys you, it annoys you. Like, you can't really necessarily help that. And I'm not like trying to tear you guys down, but it's actually really difficult to speak slowly, enunciate clearly, and put enough emotional emphasis in your words to make something sound like natural and not be annoying. Like, I've definitely received a lot of criticisms over the ways that I've articulated my videos in the past, which I could see like as definitely a lot more sing-songy about it, and it takes like a decent amount of skill to make it come across as natural, and it can honestly take a lot of time to deliberately slow down, although like some people just tend to speak a bit more slowly or enunciate a bit more clearly in their daily lives. I am not one of those people. I tend to like not necessarily like slur my words together, but I don't enunciate as well as I can unless I'm like really aware of it, or if I'm like speaking to people who don't speak English as a first language, because then it's you know, just like more on the forefront of the mind to speak more clearly. But anyway, it's not as easy as it seems, and I would definitely recommend trying to do it for oneself to see like if it comes to them naturally, being able to speak slowly, clearly, and all that. Hey 0083, welcome back to stream. Made a couple of videos a few years ago. You speak like total dog crap. It feels, I understand it, man. I struggle myself, something I work on with every video. No one has a perfect voice except Ratatosker. No, I need that freaking Crunchy or Ziostorm voice. Speaking clearly and concisely is hard work. It really is. And welcome back to Stream Gato Spaghetti. Nice to see you again. And Apollo 90, welcome on in. What am I doing? Okay.
Apparently, it comes from Old German and means knife maker. However, the plot thickens if you then assume that the word mesmer actually means mesmer as in mesmerism. And that would mean hypnotism or irresistible attraction, which, if you'll recall, is Miquella's power, drawing people to him mysteriously and having them do his will in a hypnotic way. Just look at his sister Millennia. This could imply that there is a very intriguing connection between Miquella and Messmer, but everything is speculative at this point. As the battle wages between the player and Messmer in this unknown open arena, another new narrator, female again, speaks, saying, "Come now, touch the withered arm, and travel to the realm of shadow. I will not be far behind. May we meet again." Now, upon hearing this voice line and realizing it's from a female in the lands between outside the realm of shadow, telling you to travel to the realm of shadow, and listening to it over and over again and comparing it to Melena's voice lines, I've realized they sound very similar. Take a listen.
There is something I'd like to say. I'm sure he would be much contented. Seeker of the Elden Ring.
Come now.
Oh god, that's so much louder. I was thinking that they were gonna like try to AI isolate the voice there, and not that it's like super relevant, but I like the little voice bar indicator thing. It kind of reminded me almost of like the Dark Sign or even like one of the great runes in Elden Ring here.
Seeker of the Elden Ring.
Come now, touch the withered arm and travel to the realm of shadow. I will not be far behind. May we meet again.
Yeah, I don't necessarily know if that's Melina, because Melina's voice seems to have more treble, whereas the ones delivered here seem to have like more like bass delivered with them. But that could also just be a difference in the way that the lines are delivered, to be fair, so I don't necessarily know. I tend to think that it wouldn't surprise me if this voice belonged to Miquella, and Miquella's voice could just be more feminine in general, especially with him, like, you know, potentially being afflicted with eternal youth and whatnot, but yeah. And Oswald thinks that kind of sounds like Ronnie, the accent and all. I would need to like compare the two side by side. I didn't get that vibe because I feel like Ronnie's accent is different, but I'm not knowledgeable enough in UK style accents to give an accurate analysis there. Trailer Lady has a thicker accent too, maybe. And like some of that could just be a natural byproduct of like the gap between when a voice actor first works on a character versus like when they come back to it later. They could just like be in a different headspace. I don't know. Afflicted with eternal youth. Terrible. I mean, it kind of is, but anyway. And then Levo says Melina cannot be our guide to the realm of shadow because we'd hard lock ourselves out of the DLC if we killed her. I mean, you never know with a FromSoft game. Yeah, I don't think they would actually like go that far anymore. They seem to want to make the games a lot more accessible, but in the past, I definitely wouldn't have put it past them.
If this is true, it means that the DLC takes place before Melina dies in the base game, and that she will likely follow you into the realm of shadow in order to once again likely assist with leveling up.
Alright, let me back that up to get to like the beginning of that sentence there.
Shadow.
Oh god.
I will not be far behind. May we meet again.
If this is true, it means that the DLC takes place before Melina dies in the base game, and that she will likely follow you into the realm of shadow in order to once again likely assist with leveling up. Although the specific mechanics behind that are currently unknown because presumably we will be absent from the grace of the Erdtree. But don't get me wrong, it could still be a completely new character. We then
And I think he may have only saw the one interview then, because the Famitsu interview makes it a bit more clear that there's going to be grace, or at least warping to sites of grace, or maybe the equivalent. Anyway, I'm like 90% certain it's going to be like an actual site of grace, or because like Miyazaki didn't mention like the equivalent or anything like that, so it leads me to believe that he meant actual sites of grace.
then get a shot of the logo and one
All right,
final
Elden
shot
Enthusiast, you have a good night,
an
man.
over-the-shoulder shot of a blonde, braided hair, glowing, crown-wearing individual who appears to be cleansing the great tree, as after they motion towards it, it can be seen no longer bleeding, with the drapes of light all completely removed. This seems to pretty soundly be Miquella himself, since the hair and power over what could possibly be the Halleck tree matches. Then we get an amazing new concept image about the DLC and the pre-order notice as the trailer ends. There are understandably many theories to be made about all this information revealed in this trailer, so if you're interested in hearing more about these thoughts and theories, please make sure you're subscribed to stick around for all that coverage in the days and weeks to come. And also leave a like on the video if you're excited for the shadow of the Erdtree, and leave comments below with your finds if I missed anything. That's all I've got for this one, so as always, I look forward to seeing you in the next one. This is Bandit, signing out. Peace!
Alright, I thought that was a pretty good video with its observations. Obviously, I have like my disagreements at times, but just like nothing but a thing. So, okay, I've gone ahead and linked Bandit Games video right here to chat. You guys are saying that he covers a lot of Legend of Zelda lore in the past, but moved away because Tears of the Kingdom's lore is garbage. I've definitely heard that from some other creators as well, which is pretty unfortunate. Yeah, like the Legend of Zelda games have kind of interested me in the past, but like I can never get into or like really take their stories seriously just because they seemed very obviously disjointed, and it seemed like it would take a lot of mental gymnastics to me for them to like try to make them fit together, which people have definitely performed those mental gymnastics, but I feel like Tears of the Kingdom is really showed... I can't think of the proper analogy for what I'm trying to say. Like, it's definitely not like they showed how the sausage was made, but like they showed the man behind the curtain. There we go. And that like it's kind of all made up and the points don't matter, you know? Ezekiel says Breath of the Wild set up a lot of lore that they forgot in Tears of the Kingdom. Yeah, I've seen like 1 or 2 videos about that, and it's definitely disappointing, especially if you're a very long time fan of the series and are like super invested into it. I could definitely commiserate with that, especially if like the same were to happen to a series that I particularly enjoyed. Yeah, especially because Tears of the Kingdom, as John Paul Cochran says, ignored a lot of the precedents that Breath of the Wild set, which just doesn't make a lot of sense. And they had like a lot of potential that was squandered with the way they went about the game, from what I understand. Okay, so let's go ahead and transition into our next video by the Lore Hunter with Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree gameplay, trailer, live reaction, and impressions. And honestly, so far, I've been kind of impressed by the level of analysis that others have already shown so far, with like noticing the details of like the brooches and stuff. Because to keep in mind, like obviously, I'm looking at this a month or two after the release of the trailer, so I've had plenty of time to like digest this stuff, and things have probably filtered through the grapevine in my direction anyway. But yeah, nonetheless, I think people have been doing admirable jobs so far. And these were a lot more fresh in their analyses as well.
Why, hello there. Today is the day we finally get to watch something about Shadow of the Erdtree. The gameplay reveal trailer went up about an hour ago. I wasn't able to watch the premiere live, so I haven't seen it yet. I've been on social media blackout, not looking at my phone. I don't want to see anything. I just want my pure reaction, take it all in, and I want you guys to share this moment with me because it's very exciting. It's been everything.
Yeah, this is really exciting because we haven't really seen a full-on live reaction yet, which I mean is obviously my fault because I'm the one queuing up these videos, but yeah. And Jamavra, welcome on into stream. This is new lore. You're not wrong. Honestly, like my take on like Fear of the Old lore tends to be like the old lore is essentially the English version of the game, and I'm telling people to fear it with the new revelations that I bring them.
Everything about Elden Ring is waiting, isn't it? It's been 2 years. We're finally getting something 3 minutes of goodness. Without further ado, let's get into it. Why am I afraid to click? I'm like, I'm very excited because this is, I think, reasonably the last Elden Ring 1 stuff that we get. This is the first time I'll be seeing something that'll be part of our collective understanding in, you know, just a short time, I think. I don't know if a reveal date has been shown or not. There's been rumors, but I don't know. Why am I so nervous to click?
I feel like it's because like you're in a certain sense coming face to face with your mortality, for lack of a better comparison, because like your current thoughts of the game can be completely changed with what you're about to see, you know? And so like there's a bit of like apprehension, a lot of excitement. So it's definitely understandable, I think, looking into it fresh for the first time. And honestly, like I was definitely nervous. I'm like, oh no, what if I'm wrong about everything? Like I've been there too.
I waited 2 years. Just forgive me the hype. But let's go.
Peggy 16.
Okay, Moog.
Pure and radiant, he wields love to shrive clean the hearts of men. There is nothing more terrifying.
Yeah, Gideon talking. Right? Gideon? Oh. Oh my goodness. Holy shit. Oh my god. Oh,
in that
that's
forsaken place, blood must spill. Blood of your fellows. The Erdtree faithful.
All right, I gotta stop the video because of Zolanthropus' comment there. You left class when you were having an exam just to watch the trailer at the bathroom while a guy next to you is taking the dump of his life. That is a story that shall be forever remembered. Thank you for sharing.
They were never saints. They just happened to be on the losing side of a war.
What? Oh. Ooh. It's sick. Oh my god. God damn.
Mother, wouldst thou truly lordship sanction in one so bereft of light?
Oh my god.
I presume you, too, are keen to know
Alright.
just what kind Miquella is doing here.
Yeah. Oh my god.
Those stripped of the grace of gold shall all meet death in the embrace of Messmer's flame.
Messmer.
Come now. Touch the withered arm and travel to
It
the
is
realm
Monk's
of
Palace.
I will not be far behind. May we meet again.
Ooh. Ooh. Miquella. Oh, 21st of June, 2024. What do we got here? Elden Ring, Shadow of the Erdtree edition. Shadow of the Erdtree, okay. Oh, let's see. Messmer the Impaler. Yeah, got some like right card stuff going on there too.
And I don't think I mentioned it before, but I am really curious if this is supposed to be Messmer's sigil. Then what's up with the twinned snakes? Is this also his sigil? Does he have multiple sigils? We have a bunch of the snakes surrounding it, which also seem like Messmer. We've got the sigil on this thing on the back of his cape, so it seems like it should be his sigil. So maybe there's just more to the story that we don't know there. So anyway, DMO says they stepped out of a meeting to watch the trailer. Yeah, I actually don't even remember what I was doing when I stopped to watch the trailer, to be honest. Bella was watching it with her mom, who had no idea what was going on, but still made the wow noises. Nice. Scalise says you're not watching the screen, and it sounds like he's on the most average roller coaster ever. It was great, kind of seeing his eyes and whatnot bounce around the screen as he's just trying to process all of that information live. It's kind of wild, just how much info, or how visually dense all of this stuff is, because especially the last year or two, I've seen a couple game trailers where the editing is so fast paced that it's almost impossible to absorb anything, whereas this feels like you absorb as much as you can, but you're still left wanting more, so it's just kind of it's really hard to make those kind of calls. I feel as a bit of an editor myself. Does Messmer have a ring? We don't know. There is the possibility that the kind of crescent we saw earlier could be related to him. He might have something completely different. He might have nothing at all, especially if this land was sequestered from the lands between before the shattering happened. So it kind of makes sense that he wouldn't have a rune unless people fled the lands between with the rune, if he killed other demigods, if they tried to flee the Erdtree lands between to come to the Shadow Realm and he got them. There's a lot of possibilities that could go along with that, but that's a really good question. It was in Stella's group chat notifications. No fun story for you. Hey St. Trina, nice to see you again. Hope you're doing well. Hopefully your game development is going well as well. Keith took a break from work. All right, let's go ahead and move on with the video.
Oh man, hardcover art book, official soundtrack. Messmer the Impaler. All right, all right. Holy moly.
Oh, you meant like a literal ring. I actually don't know. I would
Okay.
need to look.
Peggy 16.
Okay, now we got to go through, piece by piece.
Another talisman
No
pouch.
more of
I
this
doubt it.
Watching it without pausing business. Yeah, so Moog's Palace, I think they basically confirmed that's
Pure and
the
radiant,
entrance.
he wields love to shrive clean the hearts of men.
Stella, do you have like the Millennia statue? Because it's pretty high quality, to be honest. So I assume like the new one will be similar quality. Hey, Music Cat, welcome to the stream. Sorry for your situation, but thank you for joining.
What do we got here? Okay, man. Oh my god. It looks beautiful. There's so many castles, so much stuff to look at. Okay. We got some of these gravestones, all that stuff. Okay, so this is, you see over there in the corner, the building. So this is some of the stuff that we saw in that one teaser image that we saw last year.
And I can't tell if there's like tapestries on these buildings, but I've wondered whether or not this area specifically is where you fight like the ghost dude that like, they have the throwing knives, but yeah.
All right. Okay, so another shot of this. You got there's some nice green stuff in the background. That's some nice color there. But what is that, like veils? It kind of looks like there's stuff coming off of the Erdtree. Like, what do you call it? Like off of like a bed. Like there's like, it's a post with some like cloth or something. It's kind of
Baldican.
Let's see. You got this going right down here into this. I don't know. This gives them some eclipsey vibes. Oh my gosh. I love all the little different pieces of land. It's looking cool. Yeah, so you definitely have some. So this is like I think this is safe to say this is some sort of dream realm or something.
I don't know if anybody else feels the same way, but does anybody else get like never-ending story vibes from this image? There's something like about this that kind of reminds me of damn, what's the name of the realm? For some like Terabithia popped into my head. That's definitely not it. Anyway, yeah. I'm really curious to see like what the whole situation is with the sap here. Princess's Ivory Tower. Yeah. But I was thinking of like the whole structure beyond it. But yeah, it definitely gives me like Ivory Tower vibes, at least for the movie. Keita's getting the statue and the helmet. Nice. I didn't necessarily want the helmets because it seemed like the Millennia helmet wasn't like, I don't know, like, not that I would want to wear the Millennia helmet specifically, but it seemed a little bit small. And like, honestly, the Messmer one kind of looks a little bit goofy to me. Having now seen an eclipse, that's not what an eclipse looks like. Well, maybe you should have worn your glasses, Stella.
Dream Realm, some stuff with Miquella. Man, you sort of got. Yeah, it's giving the vibes of like Limgrave a little bit, but it's not. It's not. Got some Liurnia looking architecture, sort of a mix going on here. Now that's a sick outfit. I like that. NPC.
In that forsaken place.
Okay, interesting architecture back there. That column with the spirally stuff.
You gotta love like the absolute lore nerds who are just like, okay, what is the architecture like when looking at a brand new trailer for a video game?
Behind it, you can see. Looks like it's some architecture heavy on the reliefs.
And of course, I say that as someone who did the exact same thing.
Gothic vibes from the architecture, and it's like Ghost Flame.
Fantasia. There we go. Thank you, Scholar.
This is sick. And I like that little collar. All right. Of course, a swamp. You got this.
But at least in that swamp so far, you're like mounted and could potentially like deal with all that nonsense easily. It's not a lake of rot quite yet, but yeah.
A swamp. You got this these columns with a similar sort of
Mesmer is the Orin.
A whole bunch of stuff we've seen.
A gold and silver snake intertwined, oh no.
What is going on there? We got some magma manor going on. Yeah, it's the same reliefs with the spire.
Pigsy asks, is there any open sky scene? Sort of, but not really. Like, if you look at the skies with the lady right here, they're kind of available. You don't really see the veil, and they're almost kind of reminiscent of Kaled. And I guess there is like the skies with the flatworm looking like enemy we'll see in a little bit here. We can see the moon, which is really fascinating to me. That you can see the actual moon, as Pixie's saying, yeah. Okay. You hope they'll be worth a lot of money one day. Honestly, like I felt that way as a kid, but like when you get older, like Elden Ring is such a huge IP that I can't really imagine there's going to be enough scarcity to drive the value up. But hopefully, if you're banking on it, hopefully it pans out for you. DMO says that wizard sitting also looks like the two statues at Altus' lift, the lift of Dectus. You noticed that last week? Yeah, I actually pointed that out earlier on stream. I think when we were watching the first video with Zolie.
Early columns. So, oh man, that looks so cool. You can see it. This sort of structure winding up and up until it goes to some like floating rocks at the top. This is a sick ass design. I happen to be on the losing side of a war. I love it. Wow, that looks sick though.
To be on the losing side of a war.
I love that so much. It's such a good design. Kind of looks like a face with like a sun, but the sun is kind of like tentacles. Now this. Oh my god, look at that face. There's like teeth within teeth. This thing, it has also this, it has like the omen horns. Oh yeah. Whoa, this thing is sick. And I think you can see it kind of use like a beast magic, which obviously makes sense. See more of those spirally columns in the background. I love, like, holy moly, look at that. Animation. Oh, I love it so much. What the hell? This thing is nasty. I love it. Okay, so I just want to see it. The animation is awesome. It's like holding its mouth, leaping up. It looks almost like it's pulling its jaw down, like it's kind of like, it's got that misbegotten mouth, you know? It's like pulling its jaw down on purpose to like it's opening its jaw. Its jaw's not just opening. Nasty.
I'm so excited for that boss.
Yeah, you can see some like stone.
And I wonder if that's supposed to be like Deathblight breath. I sincerely hope not. It doesn't quite fully resemble it, but any kind of stone breath is a little bit scary to me, based on FromSoft's track record. It could also be like, I think somebody said it was like potentially similar to bestial type incantations, which I could also see that as well. And somebody was saying that the Land of Shadow could almost be like a two-way mirror with the veil. Potentially, that like you can't see it from the lands between, but maybe you can see it from the other place. Maybe. John Paul says, design-wise, it's already top 5 bosses in their games for you, and you haven't even fought it. Yeah.
Mother,
Messmer.
thou truly lordship sanction in one so bereft of light?
Got that face. Real snake theme going on right there. Come on. Oh, it's the like is that the god skin eyes?
Godskin eyes.
What's going on here? So
do I have a close up of that?
I mean,
Let me. Oh, this is my footage folder. I need my screenshots. I should probably just like look up Google. It kind of is. This is not the best angle by any means, though. Where am I even looking? Oh, okay. Oh, I do have it. I even have it labeled eyes. Huh. Not quite fully. Let's do...
I'm thinking the gods.
I could see why he would think that, but just a little bit different.
Skin. Let's.
All right. You thought he had Dragon Communion eyes? I do think they are closer to Dragon Communion as well. And also, welcome into the stream. Nate is online. You thought Messmer was a girl at first because you watched it with the video muted? Nice.
What's going on here? So, I mean, I'm thinking like Crucible stuff when you start seeing there's like a snake and wings. You know, this guy's got. He's got 5 fingers, but that look at that hand. That ain't the hand of a regular fella. That's a sick weapon too. Oh my god.
It took me a while to notice the hand thing.
I love the proportions. I like this guy's design a lot. I could go for a statue of it. So you got the snake. It's got the red hair. Oh man. This guy's got Messmer's got a lot going on. Get some new spirits.
Dawn-Eyed King, okay.
Probably. Oh man, all the new stuff. So I wanted to see that weapon, if it looked like. It doesn't really look like the spirit trees or anything. These guys also have like the omen horns. Fire breathing at us. Some raggedy clothes. What is that thing in the background? It's like it's like a banner, or maybe like there's something draped all over this building. It's big. Got someone in the traveling clothes. Oh, and you got the little beastie behind with the horns. It looks like that lion dude. Got butterflies. What the hell is a boar? It's like a big pig man. All right. What the? I love that. What is going on here? That's so good. The shape is maybe a little reminiscent of the lamp or the candle that those 2 guys were carrying who were breathing fire. Man, that's a sick look. Kind of looks like a troll that's been taken over by a slime. We've got some mimic tear action. What's going on there? Little eyes, and that horse is just... Man.
Trolls with bones.
Ugh. That's brutal. Wait. I think it's got that same kind of... All the sort of the guys breathing fire, and then the porcupine guy, the shape of the plant is all kind of like...
I'm still really curious...
The middle, like splaying out like.
I'm still really curious if this thing is supposed to be like reminiscent of the Elden Ring, or if this is like crystallized sap/amber. I'm really intrigued by this dude's design so far.
This.
Of the race of gold, shadow.
It's a cool snake.
Death flame.
Okay, so it generated a bunch of spiky swordy dudes. I like that snake is cute. Oh man. With the embrace of Messmer.
And so, like, the weird thing here is, like, Messmer's thumb doesn't look as goofy as it did before. So maybe I should, like, take back, like, the whole primitive thing. But it definitely looks weird when you first see it with him holding the flame. Anyway.
Messmer's flame.
And also, welcome to the stream, Stephen Housley.
Definitely feeling some, like, godskin stuff with him.
Touch the withered arm and travel to the realm of shadow.
Withered arm, realm of shadow. You know, Shadow the Erdtree is the realm. I mean, they're basically saying it's at Mohg's palace, but that is maybe, I don't know if there's multiple entrances or not, because that's kind of a late game area. Mohg is not like a pushover.
Oh, that's an interesting question. Stella asks if it's the same hand as the one that was holding the flame. I don't believe so.
To get through, but maybe that's the point. Maybe this is very much an end game zone. Although it's kind of like the idea of maybe multiple entrances for different parts of the DLC. But
Santeria says his hand is bigger than his head. He has cancer. Hate to be the bearer of bad news there.
Miquella. I'm curious about that. Let's see that. What is that cutscene? Is that a boss cutscene? Oh no. They're like, oh, what's Miquella up to? You might not like it. I don't see anything pouring out of the tree like normal here, so that's interesting. I don't see the cloth or whatever.
That's an interesting
so this kind of
point.
Seems like a state change, perhaps from when we've seen it in the other shots to this moment.
Actually, another thing that's interesting now that I look at it, it almost looks like the debris is kind of held where it is, like around the tree. Kind of like Farum Azula style.
21st June. So the rumors were right about that. The rumors were basically right about all of it. What is he doing? He went from this to this.
YMCA.
Bonus gesture. Ring of Miquella.
You think they're withered leaves? I was thinking that as well, but it seems like there's more going on that should not account for leaves, like around that area.
That guy is dope. His little bat wings and snake. Kind of reminds me of that one little like Lego Knight guy, but like from Softified. So instead of being a little chunky boy, he's like a gangly boy. Oh man. So Messmer, he's getting a lot of attention. Messmer the Impaler. So you got some sort of banner is. Okay, you see it right here too. So it kind of looks like omen horn stuff there. You got some flames. Got that sort of Celtic knot thing. You got the caduceus. All right. Now I got to go find out, see if there's any other info to bring into this video before we wrap it up for now. Because I'm going to deep dive. There will be more analysis stuff I can't keep away. But I got to find out what else is going on out here in the world.
Yeah, especially like with the interviews
shadow,
and whatnot.
Place obscured by the
so I think
tree.
I'll just cut this video short for
Marika
now.
First,
so that way he gets the opportunity to do like the full-on analysis when he's ready. I enjoyed it so far. Chadwick asked a really interesting question in the chat about any thoughts on Radahn hitting Farum Azula or first Estelle doing it. I honestly don't have super strong opinions on it because it seems like if Farum Azula was sent skyward later in the timeline, it almost suggests it should have happened post-shattering, which would have arguably... I don't want to say like that puts it like after Radahn went like Scarlet Rot, because there's still like enough of a time gap between the Shattering War fully unleashing and everything like that. I just don't really know, to be honest. But that's a good question. And whether or not it could have been Estelle that hit Farum Azula, it's a possibility. I just really don't know. Okay, so let's go ahead and check out Mad Luigi's Messmer's Past and Miquella's Plan Elden Ring DLC lore video. And before I forget, let's go ahead and link the Lore Hunters video here. If you guys enjoyed seeing his not so live reaction to the release of the trailer there. Okay.
A god of snakes, vegetation, and the underworld. Featuring 2 serpents, one on each shoulder, this is Ningishida, a deity of ancient Mesopotamia and the likely inspiration for Messmer the Impaler, our serpentine demigod of the Land of Shadow. In a recent video by another creator, Game Plus the Alchemist, a strong argument is made for the similarities between Messmer and this Ningishida. Game Plus's video makes the argument pretty clear, so I would recommend watching it. But to present it in short, Ningishida is the son of a warrior god who resides over the underworld. He has domain or connection with snakes and vegetation, as well as being depicted as having 2 snakes emerging from his shoulders or back. Symbols associated.
It's kind of interesting. I also like Mad Luigi's use of like this background here. I wonder if he just like ripped this from the website or something. I'm kind of curious where he got it.
Associated with him feature 2 intertwining snakes, sometimes around a staff, similar to both Messmer's staff and this new sigil. There is a lot to connect the Sumerian god with Messmer, and if it is his inspiration, which I am inclined to think it is,
N plus GRRM equals M. I was going to say, oh yeah, I know like Ontos made a video like comparing Egyptian mythology to the DLC trailer, which I haven't seen yet. So I'm curious how he would feel about something like this, which is like, no, it's not Egypt, it's ancient Mesopotamia. Silly. It's kind of like one of the funniest parts of like looking at the lore, saying who's got the 6 and who's got the 9 on the interpretive inspirations there.
Then this god's name reveals a very key part of the lore of the DLC. See, the name Ningishida possibly means Lord Goodtree or Lord of the Goodtree, or something like that. This is not only more reason to believe the connections between Messmer and this god, but it also may reveal part of Messmer's role in the world of Elden Ring, and why we might be seeing him in this DLC. Ningishida being a god of vegetation and having the name Lord of the Good Tree very much indicate that he is deeply connected with plants, crops, growing, and the life development of trees.
Oh yeah, and this is one fear that I don't think I've expressed, or maybe like I hinted at it, but I might have forgotten to like fully address it, is that even though we're told that Godfrey is the first Elden Lord, we're not necessarily told that Radagon is the second Elden Lord, which is quite troubling indeed. I might have touched on it briefly when I was saying that Messmer could be like akin to the way that Godfrey is technically a demigod, but I don't think I went that far in pointing it out. He got that good tree, man. Yeah. Actually, it's high Roman era mythology. Duh. Goddess spaghetti. And Scholar of Kurlin says, Egypt and Mesopotamian mythology actually are connected, so it doesn't matter. Yes and no, but I don't want to get into that too much now.
Central theme for a lot of Elden Ring. With him as the inspiration for Messmer, we can expect some, if not all, of these roles to carry over to the Impaler. And we cannot ignore someone with the title of Tree Lord in a game like Elden Ring, where trees, especially great ones, are a core focal point of the universe. Obviously, there is the Erdtree, which stands as a great and imposing tree and center of the lands between. But in the DLC, we have a few more making an appearance too. Ever since the first DLC reveal image, a point of focus has been the Great Dark Tree combo featured in the distance, where we seem to be seeing one dark tree coil around another tree and wring the golden life or sap out of it. If Messmer is the Lord in this land of shadow, which we have reason to believe since he is a demigod with his own throne in the area, then, given his potential inspiration name, it's not surprising to find some significant trees here.
I think it's also worth considering, and this is kind of a scary, annoying thought, that if you want to call Messmer a lord, what exactly does that mean? If the Elden Lord is linked to the Elden Ring, and that could be a lands between specific thing, could there have been something similar to the Elden Ring in the Land of Shadow that could have been ruled over by like that old dude that has the pseudo Elden Ring like piercing him, or something along that line? Have there been multiple Elden Rings in the past, or things of that nature? Were they assimilated or grafted together? We don't know. And if you want to think of Messmer as a lord, is he kind of a lord in the same capacity as Radagon and or Godfrey were lords? Maybe, likely not, but yeah, just kind of worth thinking about there. He looks like a guy who likes to wear red. Got him. Messmer's lord because he married Marika, his mom. You might not be wrong there. Messmer looks like something cooked up in a Freudian dream rather than a real person.
But that's only the start of the implications. This connection might also explain why Miquella has come to this land and what we may be doing in our following of him. Any of you who know the story of Miquella,
I gotta admit that I'm a little bit impressed that instead of Miquella, the auto caption came out with Nia or Naya.
What we may be doing in our following of him. Any of you who know the story of Miquella are aware that back in the Lands Between, his great effort was to create and grow the Erdtree, even watering it with his own blood to try to do so. Miquella sought to rid the Lands Between of the meddling outer gods, and he tried to create his own great tree to do so, a rival and replacement to the Erdtree, which the current Golden Order is centered on. But he failed. As we see in game, the Erdtree never fully grew into what Miquella intended, but now it seems like he might not have given up. Miquella divested himself of his body and his golden lineage to come to the Land of Shadow, the starting place of his mother Marika, which was long ago sealed or hidden away.
And that's kind of like one of the weird things for me so far with the DLC and the characterization of Miquella, because it feels like he's being pulled in different directions between like wanting to create an order of unalloyed gold, everything relating to the Erdtree, and then potentially setting all that stuff aside to go into the Land of Shadows. Maybe they're all like connected somehow. I would certainly hope so, but I wouldn't also put it past them if they weren't, and he just got a bit of the ADHD brain going on there.
Obscured by the Erdtree. We have been told this is where the goddess Marika first set foot, so it makes sense Miquella might come here looking for power or a way to rival the order his mother set up. But now we know of a more specific reason he may have come here too. The Land of Shadow, which has also been set ablaze by Messmer's flame, we are told, may be the land where Miquella can succeed in growing a new tree. Or it at least might hold the secret to giving him the ability to do so. If Messmer is...
And I would also like take that a step further, that if this is the place where Marika became a god, and if Miquella in Millennia's estimation is the Empyrean closest to becoming a god, that it might make the most sense for him to arrive at this land to try to fully flesh out his transcension into a new god. Which, of course, godhood being dependent on like being a vessel for the Elden Ring does open up a lot of questions as well as to Miquella's plans, especially as they pertain to the Shadowlands here. Titan, welcome into chat. You said earlier that it isn't Radagon was the second Elden Lord, but Muriel in English says, becoming Queen Marika's second husband and king consort, taking the title of second Elden Lord. You know what? Thank you so much for pointing that out. I definitely appreciate the live correction there, because I would much rather be corrected than spout wrong information. So that was definitely my mistake for not remembering that line specifically. I will say there is a bit of a caveat into that line, in that I tend to not implicitly trust all NPC information, not because I necessarily think that they're lying, but because there's a long and storied history of NPCs in FromSoft games not necessarily having the full information, and so them telling us half-truths, whether or not they are wittingly being done, or like whether or not they know that they're half-truths, or if they're just telling us what they believe to know to be the truth. So I think there's a distinction. With that being said, I think Muriel's information should generally be taken as fairly, accurate, but I think there is also the shadow, pun intended, I guess, of doubt to go along with it. But nonetheless, thank you so much for the correction there.
Is the Lord of the Good Tree, along with being a demigod son of Marika, he might have a special power relating to the growing and development of the Erdtree, or any great tree like it. He could have been a vital component in the original growing of the Erdtree in the past, and the ushering in of the original Age of Plenty. In his video, GamePlus speculates that Messmer and Marika may have had a falling out about what to do after the Erdtree finished growing and stopped giving out blessings. What to do after the holy, glorious tree your entire society is built around becomes kind of a lifeless dud. We know that in her past, Marika was big on keeping the Order going. She removed destined death from the Order to prevent any real dying, even if that act meant stagnation. If we follow this and assume she always thought like this in the past, then maybe she wanted to do the same with the Erdtree, keep it around even though it had stopped producing fruit. But Messmer, being the lord of the good tree and harnessing a strong flame, may have believed that as the tree was stagnating or decaying, it should be burned so that a new one could be grown. This would line up with him being inspired by a god of vegetation. The circle of life is dependent upon life growing and eventually dying to give sustenance to new life. So Messmer might be really keen on keeping that cycle naturally going, and Marika might not care about that aspect as much.
And that's something I touch on quite a bit with my last video, and I think that's kind of made explicit in roundabout, maybe explicit's the wrong word, made implicit, or certainly implied with the remembrance of the regal ancestor and the rot/poison. No, I guess they're like poison, ashes of war. Alright, so regal ancestor. Ancestral experience, blah blah blah. Ancestral spirits exists as a phenomenon beyond the purview of the Erdtree. Life sprouts from death as it does from birth, such is the way of the living. And if the Erdtree is a living thing, I feel like this description should also describe it to some extent. Whether or not it describes it as it currently is or as it was in the past is up for interpretation. So poison mist says, nope, wrong one. Those who dwell within poison know rot all too well. The death that begets life, that comes to all equally. That is to say, it is the cycle of rebirth put into practice. So I think with this kind of interpretation here in mind, these types of item descriptions do give support for what Luigi is putting down here right now. Oh, that sucks, El Gusto, about the Amazon package delivery. Sorry to hear that. And Scalezi says, Messmer's red-black flame might be from him wielding destined death before Malekith did. That's an interesting thought. I don't know how I feel about that, because I feel like it should almost be contingent on the rune of death being within the thing that summons the red-black flames of destined death. So are you suggesting that Messmer might have a fragment of destined death as well, kind of similarly to Malekith? Because I could potentially see that, but then I think that would raise a lot of questions of like, how much of destined death did Malekith actually have? Which I think just kind of would end up being more of a headache to me than anything else. You can't see the name Malekith without thinking of the Thor villain. I'm unfamiliar with that. Dago says, you always thought it was odd the ancestors' magics were blue, which is associated with intelligence and not faith. So to be fair, I think the blue stuff is kind of reminiscent of like spiritual power. Spiritual power in the sense of like Elden Ring spirit. Like, yeah, I don't have a better explanation than that. But all of that stuff tends to be related more to like, I don't want to say like death or like glintstone, but kind of they're like cut of the same cloth to a degree. But I guess there is also like, then how come the faith ghosts aren't? Anyway, I'm just like failing to like put this thought together here. Red is arcane, blue is kind of like magic sorcery type stuff, but it isn't entirely that clean cut, I don't think. Like, I know like a lot of people have put work into the whole like color theory. I think some of like the color theory stuff is just partly gaming conventions where like red is HP, blue is like mana, and then like green has become stamina. I think that's just like more like gameplay convenience than anything else, but they just kind of like build on it because of like player familiarity. But there might be more to it. I would need to think about this a bit more and like collect my thoughts to give them a bit more neatly and concisely here. Ghost Flame? I don't necessarily think Ghost Flame is blue, although it certainly, if you want to say like the Ghost Flame type flames which appear in certain locations like catacombs, does have more of a bluish hue. I can see what you're saying with that. Okay. Oops. What did I just do? Anyway.
Plus, there are real trees in our world that can only reproduce amidst or after forest fires, like redwood trees. This concept could serve as more inspiration for the story and setup of Messmer. Marika and the Order struggle with this idea of letting go, so imagining that they would have been against Messmer wanting to burn the tree down isn't too hard to believe.
I don't think I've talked about this in a video specifically yet, but I know I've definitely mentioned it in the Discord like a year ago at the very least, that I think there's a strong possibility that the Erdtree is like a pyrophytic tree, I don't know how you pronounce it, in that it may require fire for a natural cycle of rebirth, essentially, in that pyrophytic trees tend to release their seeds that are like encased in resin when there's a strong enough fire to make the resin melt, and then the fire tends to kill out competing forms of vegetation, and so the soil kind of gets enriched by the ashes of like the burning vegetation, and then the seeds drop from these trees, so fire ends up helping the life cycle of these trees, which is why scientists are saying like now, like, hey, let the fires burn in like California, because they've had like all the wildfires the past couple of years, and like human intervention tends to like disrupt the natural cycle of nature, I guess. So yeah, that's just kind of like what I think. And so like with Luigi talking about the redwoods and whatnot, that kind of like is what triggered this thought in my mind, because when I was looking up like trees that like release their seeds with fire and whatnot, redwoods were one of the like more well-known examples of that. And I do think there is kind of a bit of a similarity between the golden seeds and a redwood seed or something along those lines. So let me try to pull something up for you guys. Okay, like this isn't like the best like one-to-one comparison, but I think it's kind of close enough where you could kind of see the resemblance, although there isn't like ever a good I don't understand why I cannot drag stuff over like this. Sometimes it's infuriating. Yeah, it's not like a one-to-one to the golden seed, but I don't think there is a like real life tree that fully aligns with what you get with the Erdtree, between the way that its leaves look in different locations, the way that its seeds look. There's nothing that correlates to a real life tree that I know of at the very least. So, okay, going back to chat real quick. Yeah, and so the Ashen Lane Dell could be potentially from the burning of a tree, whether or not it was completely burned or partially burned. It's all up for debate as far as like the lore community is concerned. Yeah, controlled burns are a huge deal right now. Yeah, and as far as I know, like the Native Americans also like they actually initiated burns for like the replenishment of the ecosystem. Got to do controlled burns to take care of the forest. Yeah. Okay. Glad we're on the same page there.
Just like Gwyn of Dark Souls 1, Marika would have wanted to prolong the Golden Age as much as she could. And if Messmer
it feels good because I made that exact comparison in my last video.
Tried to go against her, we can see how the Land of Shadow became concealed. Messmer, acting against the goddess Marika, would have been deemed a traitor, like Lucifer turning against God, and he in the Land of Shadow would have been sealed off, hidden away by Marika, her potential firstborn, branded a traitorous snake, making full the allegory. The lore theories of a previous burning of the Erdtree could be viewed as Messmer's attempt to burn the Erdtree down, or even him burning down a different older tree to make way for the Erdtree, which would support the idea that he's in favor of burning trees down once they reach the end of their life cycle. Maybe it was in this potential fire that Melina's body was burned. Either way, if anything like this is true, we would have a good reason why Miquella would come to this land. He is here to finally finish growing his new tree. Messmer, or something related to him in this land of shadow, could be the key reason why the Erdtree was able to grow. And after failing to create the Haligtree into something more, Miquella is here to get Messmer's help, or otherwise use the tree growing power in the region to make a new tree. To grow a new tree might require burning down the old one. We see in our endings of the game that even to change the order, we have to burn the Erdtree with the Giant's Flame. In the order endings, we restore the tree, but change it in accordance with which path we take. In the other two endings, we either completely obliterate the tree with the Flame of Frenzy, or we leave it behind with Ranni's venturing into space. But in all of them, the tree must burn before we may move forward. Looking to the DLC, Miquella would obviously be okay with some arson since he wants to nuke the Order and any influence from the Outer Gods anyway. And in our speculative fanfiction, Messmer would also be ready to burn the tree down to make way for a proper new one. So maybe Miquella is looking to recruit Messmer to help him burn the current tree and grow a new one, free from Outer God meddling. But if that is the case, it will have to be explored without producing a wholly new ending at the
So I kind of want to think about that line there a bit more.
him burn the current for a new one. So maybe Miquella is looking to recruit Messmer to help him burn the current tree and grow a new one.
So yeah, Miquella wanting to recruit Messmer, I think, is a very interesting angle, but that just, I would definitely need to think about this more, but like the vibe check that I'm getting right now is that kind of feels off with the way that Messmer talks about us being so bereft of light, being chosen to be Lord. I don't think that's necessarily incompatible with what Luigi is saying here. It just, it just doesn't pass the vibe check for me right now. I need to think about that more. How do you guys feel about that in chat? Does that like pass the vibe checks for you, or you feeling kind of similarly to me here? Messmer wanting to burn the Erdtree is an assumption, right? Yes, it is an assumption. I don't think it's like a completely baseless assumption because he talks about like delivering death to us or like whoever, like, you know, come. We're told of like the war in the land of shadow. He seems opposed to the Tarnished, who might want to burn down the Erdtree. It's just kind of all up in the air. Like, yeah, no logic in that. I don't know about that, but Miquella is implied to be quite radiant. Well, we are told that Miquella left all of his gold behind to travel to this land, which is also kind of interesting. Or like Messmer saying we're bereft of light, but then for Miquella to come here, he should also be bereft of light. Maybe? I don't know. Okay.
Free from Outer God meddling. But if that is the case, it will have to be explored without producing a wholly new ending at the actual end of the game, since we have been told that we aren't getting a literal new ending sequence. Though to be fair, the Ring City DLC for Dark Souls 3 didn't create a new ending to the base game, but it did give a thematically new ending that really did close out the whole game and series in a new way, even if it wasn't a literal new ending at the very end of the game.
Yeah, and so Luigi's kind of saying this same stuff that I was earlier in the stream. And then Morlor says, Miquella looks pretty light at the end of the trailer. And there is the possibility that that could be like towards the end sequence of the DLC. But I also think there's a strong possibility it could be our foray into the DLC. And that might be when like Miquella is bringing us in. Maybe he's like, I don't want to say like he's losing his gold then, but I don't know. It's kind of weird to me that we're told that like Miquella left his gold behind, I guess. Yeah, so with that Horn said, you wondered if the DLC was going to reset us to level 1. Pretty sure that's been overturned. No, it's not going to reset us to level 1 exactly. We actually watched Ratatosker's video about this where he looked at Miyazaki's interview where they talk about how they want to have like a separate offensive power type mechanic incorporated into the DLC to kind of keep a sense of progression for players who are probably like higher leveled as well. Dago Dago asks a fantastic question in that, are grace and gold the same? Arguably, no, but they seem intertwined to the point where it's very difficult and possibly impossible to distinguish the two, because we're told it's the grace of gold at times. We're told that grace comes from the Erdtree, but in cut content, we're also told that grace was brought with the Erdtree, and gold should very certainly predate the Erdtree, so gold should be understood as a completely separate thing. Grace could just be a form of gold in a certain capacity, or kind of like squares and rectangles, or like parallelograms, I guess. I don't know. Grace or gold is stored in the body. You got that red light that leads you to the Halig tree. Does that? I don't know if that's supposed to lead to the Halig tree specifically, or if it's more of like a previous Forge against like Forge of the Giant's Flame thing, because that's the vibe that I got from like the Forbidden Lands, that you access the Forge of the Giant's Flame through the Forbidden Lands, and the Giant's Age could have potentially immediately preceded the Erdtree's age. So to me, thematically, it felt like the Wisps were more aligned with fire than the Halig tree, at least, but not necessarily impossible for it to have come from a different type of tree entirely. It's interesting, the Erdtree is like the Omphalos. It doesn't cast a shadow, but the shadow of the Erdtree is like another realm. I'm unfamiliar with that term. You thought the red light was lamplight? That is another possibility as well. And I am very curious to see if we're going to get like more about the Helfin, if that's related to the Shadowlands, but yeah. Could you reword that sentence, El Degusto? I'm not sure what you mean. All right, I'm going to go back to the video real quick.
So something similar could work here. And another potential fly in the ointment of this theory is that Messmer refers to Marika in at least a neutral tone in the trailer when remarking on us, the Tarnished. If he is still chill with her, this could upend our theory about their conflict. Or maybe the theory is still right, but Messmer just doesn't hold grudges that much. In my opinion, I think there's too much to this theory for it to be completely off base. Messmer is likely Marika's firstborn, given the statue of her behind him, which is unlike any of the statues we see in the Lands Between.
Ooh, that's pretty fun that he would say that he is Marika's firstborn, just because we've already gotten like a lot of I don't want to say like disagreement, but we have like, okay, conflicting claims where like many people believe him to be Marika and Radagon's firstborn, or the child of those two, specifically because of his red hair. So it's kind of interesting that we're getting some other takes with Mad Luigi saying Messmer could be like her firstborn. Okay, and I figured out what El Degusto was asking. You're asking if you have a dream damage kind of trait. So Miyazaki said in the Famitsu interview that there's going to be a separate like offensive ability upgrade incorporated into the DLC, so that way players who are like a higher level will continue to face like challenging bosses, and they will have the option to deal with those bosses directly, or like to back off and go to other locations and upgrade their offensive power to go back to those initial bosses or like the side content bosses and make them easier. So it's completely independent of the, maybe not completely, but it's not entirely the same type of system that we have in the base game that's being implemented to the DLC. So it seems to be something different.
The Land of Shadow has other evidence for it being an older land than the base game too, like how it houses an older culture. All of this together points to Messmer's story being an old one, interlinked with the origin of Marika and likely the Erdtree. And we have just seen a decent story tying all of that together. Plus, in this story, Miquella gets to keep his old main goal of building a new tree. His motivations remain the same, which again makes me think that Messmer's inspiration really is Ningishita. Obviously, we don't know for certain, but the signs are hard to argue with. If you think this is convincing, or if you don't, let me know why in the comments. Of course, another shout out to Game Plus The Alchemist for the great discovery and video exploring more of the actual inspiration material. Go check it out for a deeper Sumerian breakdown.
So Nimgashita stuff aside, I thought this was a very good video. Brought up a lot of good, plausible connections based off of the very little information that we have so far. So whether it pans out or not, I think is not too important. It's just like the process with which Luigi went through this is just very grounded and I think is commendable. And he said something over here which I wanted to talk on, but I kind of lost my train of thought as he went along.
Base game too, like how it houses an older lands between of her. The Land of Shadow has other evidence.
Okay. So, talking about the previous civilizations to the Erdtree being in the Land of Shadows, I think ties into that issue of like, when was the Shadowland removed from the Lands Between, and like how did that interaction happen is kind of quintessential to understanding like where to fit everything together, because even in like, I mean, this is going to sound like a very like obvious Captain Obvious says obvious thing, but even in the Lands Between, we have like pre-Erdtree civilizations that are still around, and if the Land of Shadows was part of the Lands Between, it wouldn't surprise me if pre-Erdtree civilizations were like caught in the crossfire of the continent being divided, or whatever you want to call it. So like in the mountaintops of the giants, we still have like the one Zamorian settlement. So it wouldn't surprise me if like the equivalent of a Zamorian settlement or whatnot could be found in the Shadowlands. You think Messmer is talking to the statue behind him rather than directly to Marika? That's an interesting point as well. Like, we don't know for sure whom he refers to as mother, although I think it is very fair to assume that he's talking about Marika specifically, because if he's saying the Tarnished is someone that she's deigned to be Lord, that just kind of like works with the story of like the base game, assuming the player has already completed the game. However, with that being said, there's also the very, very strong possibility that we meet an NPC who's like, oh no, be our Lord. Oh, and then Messmer's like, really? This chump? I don't know if that passes the vibe check for anybody else, but it's all open, baby. Mecha Shiva. And then Ezekiel says maybe Messmer was cursed by the giants to have red hair. Maybe he fought alongside Radagon. And that's a possibility as well. I mean, he didn't necessarily have to fight alongside Radagon, but he could have been cursed another way. We also see that Melena's hair changes color, so maybe that's something intrinsic to being cursed. To a degree. I don't know. Not all curses, but some curses. More lore wants more blind swordsman and twin bird stuff. Well, at the very least, I don't know about the blind swordsman specifically, but like the dancer in red might tie into that, whether directly or indirectly. Maybe the real inspiration for Messmer was the friends we made along the way. I feel like this is a little bit ominous because Messmer talks about like them all meeting their death. So,
for it being an older land than the base game too, like how it houses an older culture. All of this together points to Messmer's story being an old one, interlinked with the origin of Marika and likely the Erdtree. And we have just seen a decent story tying all of that together. Plus, in this story, Miquella gets to keep his old main goal of building a new tree. His motivations remain the same, which again makes me think that
Santeria was saying that you think he's literally talking to the statue, not like Marika herself. Oh no, I definitely agree with that. Or anyway, not too important.
Messmer's inspiration really is Ningishita. Obviously, we don't know for certain, but the signs are hard to argue with. If you think this is convincing, or if you don't, let me know why in the comments. Of course, another shout out to Game Plus The Alchemist for the great discovery and video exploring more of the actual inspiration material. Go check it out for a deeper Sumerian breakdown. I plan on covering more lore of Messmer and the DLC in the coming weeks and months, so stick around if you're interested. Thanks for watching, thanks to my patrons for their support, and see you in the next video. Peace.
Alright, like I said a moment ago, I do think this video was very well done, so I'm going to go ahead and give it a like and link it into the chat for you guys if you feel so inclined to do the same. And El Gusto asks, all your friends don't wish for your death? I plead the fifth. All right. So we'll probably go a little bit over time tonight, which will be fine, but let's go ahead and dive on into the Shadow of the Erdtree theory that nobody is talking about with Everbaron. And the thumbnail asks if it's the Crucible. Oh man, I missed my chance to make a stupid Crucible pun with axe, because Crucible axe. Anyway. Murder Your Memory, welcome on in. Sorry you missed the streams.
For Elden Ring's new Shadow of the Erdtree.
The good news is, if you missed the streams, they are archived on the live tab of my channel.
DLC has.
This video contains spoilers. Okay.
The first trailer for Elden Ring's new Shadow of the Erdtree DLC has been out for around 2 weeks now, and as expected, the presentation met and exceeded the expectations of a lot of fans, myself included. It was a great display, showing off gameplay additions, new set design, and of course, hinting at brand new lore. But of course, you probably already know that by now. Chances are good that already you've seen countless analyses, reactions, and commentaries regarding this 3-minute long trailer, and so have I. Everyone with even a passive interest in Elden Ring is excited about this thing, and has something to say about it, especially since there's a lot of unanswered questions and new concepts presented here. The star of the show, in many people's minds, was of course Messmer the Impaler, who was presented as a character that's simultaneously in the service of his mother, Queen Marika, while also adorning himself with iconography that stands against the Golden Order and their beliefs, which is puzzling to say the least. There's also the general presence of Miquella, with much speculation.
I do wish he went into a little bit more detail about that, specifically about challenging the Golden Order. Not that I necessarily disagree, but I'm just curious what he believes. He might go into more detail about that in a moment here, but, you know, just kind of where I'm at right now.
Being cast as to his motivations and even the nature of his actual physical presence in the Land of Shadow to begin with. And of course, there's all of the new combat styles and items to be added. But so far, the biggest thing that stuck out to me has been something different. Something that I haven't heard a lot of other content creators address, or at least not with the same amount of zeal and excitement as other matters. No, the biggest thing that stuck out to me when first watching this trailer was this short scene right here, wherein I made an astute observation. That being that this tree looks really weird. Yet, I know, not exactly the most earth-shattering revelation out there. I mean, on the surface, the impact of this observation, if you could even call it that, pales in comparison to pretty much anything else seen in the entire presentation. I'm pretty sure Messmer being revealed as a new demigod caught way more people's attention than a wacky-looking piece of foliage, but nevertheless, for whatever...
And in a weird sense, I kind of feel a little bit vindicated that like Messmer is revealed to be an unknown demigod, just because I've been memeing for so long that we might get another Filianor situation, which I think like the Messmer thing kind of fulfills the criteria of like having another royal child that you never hear of in the base game or base content just kind of randomly get thrown out there. Although to be fair, I do think it is set up a bit more tangibly in Elden Ring, because you got the Church of Pilgrimage ghost talking about how Marika has like unwanted bastard children in the Wandering Mausoleums. So I always thought there's the possibility for more, but still kind of annoying that there wasn't more in the base game to like hint at it, I suppose. Speaking of heat, can you say it wasn't warm? Like, hold on. Like, I understand the question. I'm just trying to like, okay. It was not warm. So warm in the, hold on. Why am I blanking so hard? Okay. So if you're trying to say like warm in the sense of like body, like body temperature warm, not that's like air temperature warm. Like you could say like, so the word is atatakai, which means like warm, but if you want to conjugate it into past tense, it'd be, hold on, I'm having a moment. Atatakanaka. Oh my god. Hold on. I gotta like type it out. Atata kanakata. Yeah, okay. Anyway, too many similar syllables there. So if you're talking about like temperatures specifically, but if you're talking about like food stuff, yeah, you could say that. But if you mean like hot, it'd be like more like atsui. Anyway, not too important. Why do you want to know? Scalisi says demigod might get expanded out to semi-divine and not all Marika's children. Could you elaborate on what you mean by semi-divine? Scalisi says Messmer's flame looks more viscous than just being red ringed with black. I don't know about that because it's not viscous kind of in the sense of like lava, but we also haven't seen quite enough of it for me to like feel fully confident saying one way or the other. Okay.
Reason, this has been the thing that I've continued to think about, and the more I've thought about it, the more I've come to believe that this weird-looking tree may actually hold the key to revealing not just the story of this DLC, but that it may actually serve to reveal the solutions to some of Elden Ring's oldest unanswered questions. I'm serious when I say that I think this short clip that doesn't even occupy 5 seconds of screen time might be one of the most important parts of this whole presentation. Forget about Messmer, forget about Miquella, this gnarly old tree is the solution to absolutely everything. And today,
yeah, but I mean, this dude was dual wielding rivers, so I don't think we should really take anything he says seriously. All right. El Gusto said, semi-divine meaning anything more than mortal, you think, not necessarily half-god only. So, with that being said, how do you feel about like the wandering nobles? Would you call them semi-divine in this paradigm here? Oh, Chadwick is saying Rykard, Radon, and all of them aren't called demigods until Radagon leaves Rennala. No, it's until... Well, yeah, I see what you're saying there. Until he like weds Marika. So the world, they were born normal humans. Those descriptions really bother me. That technically the Karian children aren't demigods until like except by virtue of wedlock, because in a certain sense there's still like half Marika because Radagon is Marika. That's like honestly one of the item descriptions which bothers me the most in the entire lore there. Marika's fully divine and people below her standing are partially divine. Okay, I see what you mean. So demigod might get expanded out to semi-divine and not all Marika's children. Not all Marika's children. Yeah, maybe it's just too late because I feel like I'm not fully understanding the nuance of what you're trying to get across, because like if they're children of Marika, they still have some level of godhood, but I don't understand where you're trying to divide demigod from semi-divine. So is there like a difference between demi and semi in your mind? Clown can't wait to see how wrong we are about everything. I'm apprehensive, excited, all that fun stuff right there. Like if Godfrey wasn't a demigod, you'd say it was actually her children, but he throws things off. Okay, so yeah, demigod could be okay. So you're saying like semi-divine could be more like hereditary, whereas like demigod could be like matrimony, like wedlock, that kind of thing, like law, maybe. Hopefully you're still typing here. Don't want to get distracted by the video. All right, gonna wait a couple more seconds and then I'll just like play it. And going.
Today, I'm going to try and explain why that assumption may not be quite as presumptuous and absurd as I've been playing it up to seem. My takeaway from this trailer is that we're going to be heavily exploring the age preceding
Demigod is
that
a
of the
social
Erdtree,
contract?
and
Maybe.
having a lot of information revealed pertaining to Queen Marika's rise to power, as well as finally revealing the significance of a lot of metaphysical lore concepts that currently are seen as sort of adjunct accessories loosely revolving around the greater narrative of the game. But before we get into all of that, let's set the stage. After all, what is the Land of Shadow all about in the first place? Owing to information from the Elden Ring website and an interview with director Miyazaki hosted by IGN, we already know quite a lot of information concerning the overarching plot of the Shadow of the Erdtree expansion. First, we know that the Land of Shadow is a location obscured by the Erdtree itself, perhaps literally located in its shadow. As such, I think there's been a general assumption that this tree is just the Erdtree, somehow, but we'll get back to that point in a little bit. For now, let's read what Hidetaka Miyazaki has to say on it. When asked to briefly give an overview of the DLC, its setting, and its story during the aforementioned IGN interview, Miyazaki said, quote, "First of all, the setting of Shadow of the Erdtree is a brand new land. It's a brand new map, separate from the lands between. It is a land that is overshadowed by the particular Shadow of the Erdtree, as opposed to the Erdtree in the lands between, and it takes place, again, on an entirely separate, physically separate map. So it will involve a warp of sorts to get there. In terms of setting and themes, it technically occupies the same space as the lands between, the same universe, but due to something story-related that we won't reveal today, this has become physically disconnected, and you'll travel to the Shadow of the Erdtree land as a separate place. So this Land of Shadow itself is a place the player will visit to walk in the steps of Miquella. Miquella is a key part to the story this time, perhaps as guessed by many players who saw the art that was released previously. This is in fact Miquella, and it is he who traveled to the Land of Shadow, and it's the players who will be tracing in his path and following in his footsteps, trying to see what he's going to do there. Another axis of the story is Queen Marika, and what she did in the Land of Shadow, and what led Miquella to follow her there. Honestly, that's a pretty concise explanation considering we only have a cryptic trailer to go off of, and combined with some detail offered on the official Elden Ring website, which refers to the Land of Shadow as the place where Queen Marika first set foot, it seems clear to me that this DLC will place an emphasis on Marika's origin of sorts, as I alluded to earlier.
And honestly, I'm really glad that Miyazaki did go into that much detail about the trailer and the setting of the Shadow of the Erdtree, because even though there's still like a lot of unknowns, could you guys imagine how much worse like people's speculation would be if these interviews didn't exist? There'd still be people like super confident that this is all the past. Some people would be arguing it's the future. Others would be arguing for certain that it's the Dreamlands. Others would be like arguing it's like the spirit world. And like, while all of these are still, you know, some potentially valid readings to a degree, maybe without like the time travel stuff, it's just like now we're like a bit more grounded with what we have so far. So yeah. And then Dago said, Ratatosker said something about Marika absorbing stuff offhand on a podcast, and you've always thought something similar. Could you elaborate on what you mean by like absorbing stuff? Is he like talking about the way that you can add mending runes to her, or is there something more to it, like grafting, or like absorbing Radagon, or like shapeshifting? I'm curious as to like the context to that. Aldegusta says, America knows their true nature, so they just can't ignore the demigod status, even if the normies don't know the truth, maybe. He didn't elaborate. It's a pretty abstract idea, but you've had similar thoughts? Okay. And Aldegusta says, maybe shadowed lands are like the past, which can be interacted with in dreams. I don't know. That's not the vibe that I'm getting so far, based off of the interview, at least.
What does that entail exactly? What came before the Erdtree and the Golden Order to begin with? Well, to understand that, we need to explore how the passage of time works in Elden Ring, or at least how eras of time are most broadly defined. You see, the macroscopic timeline of the Elden Ring world can be defined in terms...
Uh-oh, I'm a little bit scared. I mean, not really. Like, if I have disagreements, it's just a drop in the bucket, you know? But it's just kind of always funny to see like where everyone's thoughts are gonna lie. So I'm curious what we're going to get.
Terms of ages, with an age being loosely defined as an era of time in which a given set of metaphysical properties is imposed upon the land via the Elden Ring by a god. A god is someone who was A, once an Empyrean, someone chosen by the greater will as a candidate for godhood, and B, who rose to the challenge and actually asserted themselves as the god of the age. Now, the role of a god is a very important one.
I'm not sure if that definition is quite that clear and dry, although I don't think there's anything like necessarily to contradict it in the game. I would just say that we have a lot of unknown unknowns with the whole Placidusax and his gods situation.
1. For it is the god of the age that essentially dictates how reality will function via possession of the Elden Ring. The easiest and really only complete example of this process that we have to work with is, of course, that of Queen Marika and her rise to power, where, after becoming a god, she removed the Rune of Death from the Elden Ring in order to instill a immortality of sorts that she saw as a more fitting state of being. Another aspect that
And obviously with the choice of language used throughout here, sorry, what's this content creator's name? Everbaron believes, I'm assuming that this is like right when Marika becomes god, and he believes that's when the Golden Order was established. I obviously disagree with that for many reasons, which I've posted in my latest video. I meant to make a full-on infographic of just like the list of reasons to doubt that. What's the word? Assumption? Or not assumption. Anyway, because I have like a list of 17 reasons, which are like broken down into even like further like sub reasons to like doubt that line of thought. But anyway, I'm of the opinion that the Golden Order was established later and that the Rune of Death was probably removed from the Elden Ring at the end of the Age of Abundance or something along those lines. Anyway, going back to the video here.
that appears to be of some importance, though, is the existence of an Elden Lord, presumed to be someone engaged in a union with the God of the Age in some way. Unfortunately, the qualifiers for signifying an Elden Lord are somewhat unclear, but we can assume that they probably aren't quite as important as the God of the Age themselves, since Queen Marika went through 2 Elden Lords. The first.
And so I think what Everbaron, is that right? I just looked at it. Yeah, Everbaron just said here is kind of a good caveat to mention. Like the God of the Age, I think is clear enough where he's trying to not talk about the Outer Gods specifically, because Scalise said the Outer Gods don't fit that description. So I think he has been pretty clear that he's talking about like God as it pertains to the Elden Rune versus like the more nebulous idea of like what the Outer Gods are, at least.
First of whom was Godfrey, who was later replaced with Radagon, Queen Marika's other half. Now, it might be easy to assume that all of these titles and points of status are purely constructs of Marika's age, but there's good reason to believe that these concepts of godhood and lordship are more ingrained in the passage of ages as established by the Greater Will than they may at first seem. When the optional boss Dragon Lord Placidusax is slain from Farum Azula, they drop an item known simply as the Remembrance of the Dragon Lord, which reads in part, "The Dragon Lord, whose seat lies at the heart of the storm beyond time, is said to have been Elden Lord in the age before the Erdtree. Once his god was fled, the Lord continued to await its return." This rather cleanly establishes that concepts like Elden Lord and gods existed in some form before the rise of Marika, and it also conveniently allows us to start painting a picture of what the age preceding the present may have looked like. As the present age has Radagon and Godfrey before him as Elden Lords, the age of the past had Placidusax. As the present age has a god in the form of Queen Marika, the past had an unnamed god, now fled. And as the modern age has the Erdtree, the past most likely had an icon of its own, known as the Crucible of Life. Now, for those who don't know, the Crucible, or more properly, the Crucible of Life, is one of the oldest concepts chronologically found in all of Elden Ring lore. It is described as a manifestation of the Erdtree's primal vital energies, and, at least in the game's English translation, as the place where all life was once blended together. Now, right off the bat, I should make it clear that this line is written a little bit different differently in the original Japanese, and the correlation between the Crucible and the primordial origins of life are not as well defined in this original version of the text, but the implication remains largely...
Yeah, let me double check that. Yeah, okay.
Are
Good
not
enough.
as well defined in this original version of the text, but the implication...
Oh, I didn't see that because of the thing. I wanted to see where you're sorting it from.
Origins of life are not as well defined in this original version of the text, but the implication remains largely the same. In essence, the Crucible has a deep and intimate link with the creation of biotic organisms themselves.
So this is where I would heavily disagree, and while I do commend him for trying to go into a bit of investigative journalism and trying to get to the root of this, part of the reason why I disagree literally just comes down to the Crucible night set, which I talk about all the time on the stream because it comes up all the time because everybody has different feelings on the Crucible than me because of this. So let's pull this up. All right. So holds the power of the Crucible of Life, the primordial form of the Erdtree, strengthens aspects, blah, blah, blah. So the issue here is the Crucible of Life is the primordial form of the Erdtree in English, whereas the Japanese is really troubling to me here because it doesn't say primordial Erdtree, or any primordial form of the Erdtree, which implies something that could predate the Erdtree. This just says the original Erdtree. Now, part of the reason this is so problematic to me is that original Erdtree doesn't necessarily mean something predating the Erdtree. To me, this is trying to be pretty explicit that there is an Erdtree and not the primordial soup form of the Erdtree or a seed from which the Erdtree grew. I think this is an Erdtree in an earlier state than the Erdtree that we have now. And the way that I reconcile that is that I think the nature of the Erdtree was changed with the Golden Order and the removing of the Rune of Death, and so that the original Erdtree was one where life was blended together. It doesn't say that specifically in this one, but it gets hinted at with all of the Crucible stuff together. And this was a real wrinkle in my understanding of the timeline because the Gilded Great Shield, which I talked about in my last video, but maybe I should have harped on it more. Not that I think this video should have known better, just because anyway, it's not like my video was made beforehand or anything like that. So the Gilded Great Shield in English makes it an incontrovertible fact that something like a primordial ooze type situation predated the Erdtree, because it says the red tinge and the gold coat mirrors the primordial matter that became the Erdtree. There's only one way you could possibly interpret this in English if you're actually reading the text of the game, and that primordial matter became the Erdtree, whereas the Japanese doesn't quite read it that way. It just says that the redness that is on the coating of the shield is closer to the Erdtree's origins. And that's vague enough that it doesn't mean primordial matter. And that could mean the first form of the Erdtree, whether that means the Erdtree during Godfrey as opposed to Radagon's time, or it could potentially be the primordial ooze. It's just not that set in stone. And part of the reason why I talk about this at length ties into everything else relating to the Crucible. All the Crucible incantations talk about that they're related to the Erdtree. As far as I'm concerned, everything relating to the Crucible is, at the current state of the game, is inseparable from the Erdtree. There is nothing which just leaves the Crucible on its own, that it doesn't tie into the Erdtree in any capacity, which is very troubling. And this could change with the DLC, and I could be wrong, and I'd be fine with that. But there's just enough ambiguity here where I keep on harping on this, not to say that I'm necessarily right, but that it shouldn't be as set in stone as it unfortunately is due to the localizations here. And just to keep standing on my soapbox for a little bit longer, I'll go back to Ordovis's Greatsword, because I talked about this in my last video, that primordial gold here might be a typo in the original Japanese, and not necessarily what I would call a translation error. So it says Gensho no Ogon, which is original gold, but everything relating to Gensho, and you'll see this like come up with like gold and whatnot. So let's go to the Godskin Noble set. So this will talk about, where are we? So inhuman aspects are within like their bodies essentially. That is the Erdtree's origins. The Crucible it resembles also. So like the origin of the Erdtree is the Crucible, or like this reading, I would say, makes it sound like there should have been like the primordial matter, which became the Erdtree, but it's just like all the other stuff which like made me rethink things. I talked about the Crucible Knight set. All right, so the Crucible scales, talismans are also like the life's origin, which is the Crucible. It's like a relic of the Crucible, which serves as the origin of life. But the issue with this is that I think not all life was all blended originally. And when you look at things like the Elden John statues, they're not like blended creatures, which should predate the Erdtree. We have the ancestral followers, which are not like blended creatures, which may or may not predate the Erdtree. They're kind of their own thing. I think like the ancient dragons are non-chimeric creatures, and that they're kind of all their own like individual stuff. So I think there's another point that I wanted to make about that, but going back to like the whole Ordovis's greatsword thing. Oh yeah, the Crucible aspects are the most important probably. These just say like in the past, like life was blended together. The Erdtree's origin, the power of life, the Crucible, it's like one of those aspects. So it's just so freaking messy here in general. But Ordovis's greatsword, like everything relating to primordial stuff. Oh yeah, that's what I was supposed to like be pointing out. Sorry, I got lost in the sauce there. Everything that talks about like the primordial stuff talks about the Ogon Ju, which maybe I should just like pull up my video where like have all the text highlighted. They all reference the Erdtree, gold tree, as opposed to just gold itself in Ordovis's greatsword. So this, I think, is very possible that it should have been read as the original Erdtree is closer to life, and therefore it is said to have possessed redness. And so if the Erdtree was red, and all of that stuff is related to the Crucible, it just like ties into the whole like not necessarily being the originator of all life, but rather a filter for all life to get like brought into via Erdtree burial, blended together, and like pooped out as like misbegotten or whatnot. So anyway, my apologies for being on such a long rant and completely ignoring the chat. Hopefully I wasn't muted at all. No, I wasn't. Okay. It's like this guy is phrasing everything just for me. Yeah, he was doing really well. And like, I don't really blame him here. I was actually like really impressed that the way that he phrased. Yeah. I should probably like, cause it definitely crossed my mind as he was setting up the way he was talking about Placidusax in relation to Marika and Godfrey. I was really impressed that he didn't immediately push out that the Placidusax was an Elden Lord. He said was like that age's Elden Lord. Yeah, so I definitely commend him for like all of that effort, especially like this. Definitely put a lot of effort like trying to be as close or like to be as knowledgeable about the source material as possible. So it's unfortunate he may not have the full picture, or even if he does, he may disagree with me, which is perfectly fine. But yeah, just want to give you all that perspective that I can as well. Dagos asks, does it use similar language when referring to the Crucible? So I'm not entirely sure what exactly you're asking, like in what context. Like I understand your question, but I'm not sure if you're looking for a specific thing necessarily. So yeah, you could like look up the word that they use for Crucible. It shows up like, you know, a decent amount. So like the bunning horns and whatnot. I don't know exactly what you mean by like the same language. So like all the Crucible aspect stuff. Oh yeah, I guess I could like talk. I can harp on that a bit more. So what do we have in English? Oh, okay. vestige of the Crucible. Yeah. Let's see what they're going there. Let me look at the aspects. I'm going to misbegottens. Aspect of wings. Okay, so that's good. I don't really care about that right there. Silurius tree. So like all that stuff does come up. Like the Crucible stuff comes up with like the Erdtree's origins, which isn't contradicting like our friend's point of view here. But the other thing with like Silurius tree and the Silurian helmet, they talk about the Great Tree, which I'm of the opinion that like you can't necessarily separate Great Tree from Erdtree. So it kind of like comes together from like multiple vantage points, which kind of like reconfirms my confirmation bias at least. Crucible Horn Shield. Oh yeah. So the Crucible Horn Shield also talks about the redness within its gold. Okay, I forgot about that. But that's perfectly fine. But it doesn't necessarily talk about primordial gold specifically. But we do have red gold. Yeah. And so, yeah, the Crucible Horn Shield is one of the examples which I compare it to like the Gilded Great Shield with the redness. Oh, I should probably like look at the English for you guys. An ancient holiness dwells within. The Crucible Horn skewers foes in performing shield bashes. Let me double check that. Yeah, Crucible Horn. Okay. Features a great horn. Okay. Yeah, so like the thing is like most of the times when the Crucible appears, it's kind of in reference to the Erdtree to some degree. So the Crucible Horn Shield does not mention the Erdtree itself, but it does say like the red having gold, but it doesn't necessarily say primordial gold, which is a little bit annoying, but it is related to the Crucible Knights. So you might be able to make the argument that primordial gold is a thing, which is why I said in my video to take what I said with like Ordovis's greatsword with a grain of salt, which I should have also used that disclaimer here today, because Ordovis's greatsword could be talking about like legitimately the original gold as opposed to the original Erdtree, but the Gilded Great Shield to me in conjunction with Ordovis's greatsword and the Crucible Horn Shield and whatnot. I guess, yeah, the Gilded Great Shield isn't going to talk about the Crucible explicitly. The primordial matter that became the Erdtree, or like it's closer to the original Erdtree. So you could say that the Gilded Great Shield could be making a reference to the Crucible, but if you're going to make that argument, I don't think that really works because this is supposed to be carried by knights that are loyal to Godric, and the whole deal with Godric is that he like glorified Godfrey, and grafting and all of that stuff, in my opinion, should be kind of affiliated with like the Erdtree. And sorry I didn't like articulate that earlier. Hopefully, like for anybody who's kind of new to the stream, all of this is kind of making sense in the grand scheme of things. But if it isn't, I apologize, because it's just kind of hard to like talk this stuff like off the cuff, trying to remember like every little item description that deals with it. Typo, like wrong character. Typo as in like they dropped a character. So kind of, but not exactly. Oh yeah. Sorry. So this is kind of like Dunning-Kruger, where I forget what I know and what people don't know. So let's see here. As maybe I didn't make it clear, maybe I did. So Ogonju versus Ogon. So this is Ordovis's greatsword. Right here we have Ogon, which means gold, and then all these other descriptions we have Ogonju, which means Erdtree. And the way that that works is that these are the characters for gold, and these are the characters for Golden Tree, and Golden Tree is just how they refer to the Erdtree. So I think it's possible they might have just forgotten a letter, essentially, to come up with primordial gold as opposed to primordial Erdtree, Gold Tree. Ordovis's great salt. More Lore says, it's funny because the proposed interpretation, which I'm saying goes against the game, it tells us, is literally what you thought anyway. And I mean, like, sometimes, like, that just happens. Like, if you ignore certain amounts of the text, you can still kind of come at the right answer, which is, like, kind of a super backwards way to approach the lore, where you kind of ignore what the text says. So this is kind of, like, one of the reasons why, like, my channel is the way that it is, because, like, at least in Bloodborne, for like another parallel example, the brain of Mensis is said to have specifically been retrieved from the nightmare, which implies that it had to have been in the nightmare to be retrieved from. But the Japanese word for that they used in the English as retrieve is a bit more ambiguous and could mean just to get or like receive rather than retrieve, which could be more passive. And so, like, the scholars of Mensis could have received like gigantic malformed brains in the nightmare, and those are like avenues of interpretation that are closed off in the English text of the game, unfortunately. And I feel like this is kind of the same principle applying here with the Gilded Great Shield description specifically, because as soon as somebody reads that sorry. Oh, yeah. So I guess I did retranslate some of this stuff. The red tinge and the gold coat mirrors the primordial matter that became the Erdtree. This, like, there's no other way to interpret, like, what the Crucible is in relation to the Erdtree. Whereas the Japanese, it's not as clear. And with all of the Crucible style incantations being ancient Erdtree incantations, and everything relating to the Erdtree everything relating to the Crucible being explicitly related to the Erdtree in one way or another, leads me to believe that the Crucible is the quote-unquote original Erdtree. And my opinion is the original Erdtree would be Godfrey's Erdtree, and that it must have been changed later to become more immutable and perfect and eternal, which you can't really make that argument super well with the English version of the game. All right, so sorry for like being super, super redundant there. I hate having to do it, but I also want to be clear. So if you guys do have any questions, feel free, because I just kind of hate being so pedantic about it, but I feel like it's just like it keeps rearing its ugly head. Trying to use the positive connotation of the Dunning-Kruger effect. Well, it's true. Like, I mean, that is like one of the aspects of the Dunning-Kruger effect. Like, it's not all negative. It's a bell curve where sometimes, like, what might be obvious to somebody who's like very familiar with the material isn't necessarily going to be obvious to somebody who's not. So, like, sometimes, like, I was just like looking at all of the Japanese text a moment ago. I don't know how easy that is for you guys to follow along, even if I'm like highlighting things at times. So hopefully it makes sense, because like, just like the aspect ratio isn't like the best to keep both the English and Japanese on screen at times. And that's like a little bit of my fault with like the spreadsheet, but anyway, yeah. You just think that both interpretations are compatible, even with this? You think that the primordial matter that became the Erdtree... I just don't understand how you could come to that like conclusion. And this could be a me problem. Like, don't get me wrong. So if you like want to describe it more, feel free to do so. And I'm not trying to say like you personally like ignored it. I just noticed like this is a pattern with like people in general, and maybe ignore is a bit too strong of a word. Like, maybe not like I don't want to say like being ignorant of it either, because that could have like certain connotations, but just like it's very easy to not have all of the game's text in your mind when you're thinking about like your lore theories, you know? Like I said earlier in stream that like Radagon isn't called the Second Lord. Titan is like, oh yeah, no, he is called Second Lord by Muriel. Oh, no, I just forgot, because like that might be the only time that it happens in the game, and it's just by Muriel, you know? Okay, so More Lore is saying, you guess when it says primordial form of the Erdtree, you interpret it as basically the earliest form of the Erdtree. So I understand why you could come to that conclusion, I suppose, but not to like pick on you or anything, but the issue with that, in my estimation, is that primordial in English has a very specific connotation of being like prehistoric and not necessarily original, which is why I harp on like the primordial stuff so much. So existing at or from the beginning of time, i.e. primeval, especially of a state or quality basic and fundamental, which like this could work, but I don't think that definition necessarily works with this specifically, although I understand like you could make that argument. And then of biology of a cell, part, or tissue in the earliest stage of development. Yes, I can see primordial germ cells kind of working with this, but in general, many people who will read this take primordial to mean it in the first definition, which is like valid, but it isn't the only one. And so my goal is to combat this reading because it isn't that cut and dry about it. Yeah. Okay, so Stella's on the same page there. Yeah, and so Morlor says, you know enough about the English language to know that primordial doesn't make sense, even when it's correctly translated, because the Erdtree doesn't exist since the start of time, no matter what. And so the issue here is that this isn't saying that this is the Erdtree, this is primordial matter that became the Erdtree. So with that in mind, this is specifically something that is not the Erdtree, but is still related to what would become the Erdtree. So does that make sense? All right. Good night, Clown Scum. And thanks for dropping in, as always. And if anybody else has questions in the chat, feel free to let me know. Otherwise, I'll probably start the video here pretty soon here. And if you want to discuss like this stuff in more nitty-gritty detail somehow, or like more coherent detail, like I would highly recommend like joining the Discord. We've had this conversation ad nauseum, don't get me wrong, but yeah. Morlor says, technically everything is made of primordial matter eventually, because everything was primordial matter at some point. So it's technically correct no matter what. I would disagree with that, because like I would say like, sure, like we're all stardust, but that doesn't necessarily mean that like if you cobble stardust together, you're going to like get a child or a tree or anything like that. All right. Needs more chemical reactions. Okay, so with all of that out of the way, hopefully I've made like my crazy points clear that I think the Crucible should be understood as the Erdtree based off of what little we have so far. And maybe the DLC will change that. But yeah, okay.
The Crucible and the primordial origins of life are not as well defined in this original version of the text, but the implication remains largely the same. In essence, the Crucible has a deep and intimate link with the creation of biotic organisms themselves, as evidenced by iconography of animal parts such as feathers, scales, and horns being often associated with the Crucible and its creations. In Crucible magic, all manner of faculties relating to birds, amphibia, reptiles, and mammalia can be observed, but although we can identify many elements that are symbolic of the Crucible, you may have noticed that I have yet to tell you what this thing actually is. And that's on purpose, because truth be told, it's never been overtly stated, though there is one big clue. The Crucible Axe armor set, dropped by Crucible Knight Ordovis, and the Crucible Tree armor set, which can be collected from a chest after defeating Crucible Knight Siluria, both have a selection of descriptions between them, all of which make mention of the Crucible of Life being, in no uncertain terms, the primordial form of the Erdtree, which can be taken a couple of different ways. The first is that the Crucible may literally have been a tree itself, perhaps not unlike the tree that we see in this new trailer. But another implication here is the notion which led us to discuss the Crucible in the first place. It simply corroborates the idea that the Crucible, whether it be a tree or not, preceded the Erdtree as the symbol of an age gone by. And if we re-examine the trailer with this assumption in mind, that this tree may be a physical representation of the long-lost Crucible of Life, then a lot of things actually start to make a bit of sense. In the lands between, creatures and magic which stem from the Crucible are considered an affront to the Golden Order, as a result of Marika's assertion of herself as the one true god. Creatures that demonstrate Crucible aspects, such as the omens, are considered blasphemous, along with creatures that bear a more pronounced or overt link to the Crucible, such as the
Okay, so yeah, I was going to say, technically we don't really know if the Omen are Crucible touched. I think it's likely, but there is also the possibility that they could predate the Erdtree entirely. That is something I've entertained with like the Omen children of Marika and Godfrey. But yeah, I would say like it's definitely without a doubt that the Misbegotten are Crucible touched, but technically not explicit with the Omen.
Along with creatures that bear a more pronounced or overt link to the Crucible, such as the Misbegotten, which are, in my opinion at least, exemplary of the Crucible's ability to blend life together. But in the Shadow of the Erdtree trailer, figures such as this Lion Dancer boss, adorned with horns and the head of a great golden lion, speak to a depiction of Crucible magic that seems less stigmatized. As many content creators have already suggested, this boss appears to be, in actuality, a number of individual people or figures of some kind dressed in a costume. Such a guise appears almost ceremonial, and while I've heard speculation that it may depict Godwyn or some other member of the Golden lineage, it's hard to discount the Crucible iconography that—
How wild would it be if like Godwyn was a lion? I don't believe it based off like the story trailer and like him getting got by the Black Knife assassins the way that he's got, but there's just kind of really a funny mental imagery. Not that he's implying this, it's just kind of like popped into my mind right now.
That's present all over this thing, and it's not the only time that we see such iconography depicted in this trailer. Here, we see what appears to be an incantation similar in nature to those of Dragon Communion, but instead evoking the form of a great bear with gnarled horns, another clear indication of the Crucible's signature blending of life. And shortly hereafter, this creature, similar to a hippopotamus, exhibiting a gaping jaw full of massive teeth, which erupts with quills not dissimilar to that of a porcupine, can also be seen, another being archetypical of the aforesaid themes, and yet another clear representation of Crucible magic. I also think the coloration of this spell is worth mentioning, as it's similar in tone to the other aspect of the Crucible incantations found throughout the base game, all of which share this sort of sparking reddish gold effect. And
yeah, I was going to say, like, it does seem a little bit more vibrant, and it's kind of hard to get a good read on what is, like, quote-unquote yellow gold versus, like, the red-tinged gold, but I do think that the hippo stuff is slightly more reddish hued, but that could also just be confirmation bias, although I think it's pretty self-evident that it's probably, if not Crucible related, certainly, like, Crucible adjacent.
As it happens,
Godwyn is always
color,
a fish person.
Reddish gold, is important in more ways than just this. The description of Ordovis's greatsword, the weapon that once belonged to the same knight as the Crucible Axe armor set, reads, "Greatsword of Ordovis, one of the two honored as foremost among the Crucible Knights. This sword is imbued with an ancient holy essence. Its red tint exemplifies the nature of primordial gold, said to be close in nature to life itself." This description is interesting, isn't it? Primordial gold is not the same shade of gold that we see within the Erdtree, and it's not the same type of gold that we see in the Golden Order incantations either. No, it's a deeper...
To be fair, I would argue this is the ancient Erdtree incantation and not necessarily Golden Order, but that's probably just a disagreement there.
Type of gold that we see in the Golden Order incantations either. No, it's a deeper, more rich color. A color not unlike this one, seen in the sap of the tree from the Land of Shadow. Now, you wouldn't be remiss to think that that's a little bit of a leap in logic, and to decry that these colors being of negligible similarity is nonsense. But to that, I say, don't just take my word for it, because the description of the Crimson Amber Medallion offers something interesting. A medallion with Crimson Amber inlaid, boosts maximum HP. The Erdtree's old sap becomes amber, treasured as the most precious jewels in the age of Godfrey, the first Elden Lord. A primordial life energy resides inside.
And this terminology is consistent in the Japanese as well. Let's look it up. Oh, I'm on the wrong tab, obviously. So, primordial life energy resides inside. So, this is like, I guess it is somewhat different. I mean, it's like a synonym, essentially. Genshi Teki. So, Genshi versus, what did we have a moment ago? Shouldn't be Genshi Teki. I'm drawing a blank. So this is going to appear in the Amber Medallions, and that's pretty much it, I think. So what? Crucible Axe. Gensho. Okay, Genshi versus Gensho. Yeah, I don't know why I blinked. So, I guess to show you guys Genshi. So this is what we had just a moment ago, the origin, the beginning, the genesis. And I'm just like saying, like, they aren't exactly the same word, but the idea is the same with the two. So like part of the reason I'm bringing this up again is because, let's go ahead and close that. As I'm pretty confident he's probably going to make this like point here in a moment. It's just like all of this stuff is related to Godfrey and the Erdtree in my mind. The Erdtree's old sap becomes amber. It's a primordial type of energy, and I think that's all like related to the Crucible, which I think is going to be like the broader point of this video as well.
So, if you haven't guessed yet, then allow me to illustrate what I think this scene actually
And Stella says they don't look the same color.
Exactly I've spent so much time thinking about it, making this video, and zealously preaching that this weird-looking tree is so significant. Obviously, as I think I've made clear by now, I believe this tree is what we call the Crucible of Life. I'm not denying that it may go by other names as well, such as how Miyazaki calls it a shadow tree at one point, and it certainly wouldn't be the first time in Elden Ring lore that an important concept goes by two different titles. But the description of the Crucible, as essentially the Erdtree of a prior age, fits too well with the narrative of the DLC thus far established for me to believe at this point that it could be anything else. I also think that the Icarus gold sap seen spilling forth is also a clear parallel to the mentions of primordial gold, and that it matches, even if imperfectly, with the tone of the Crucible Knight's equipment when shown in proper light. I believe this is most clearly evident in Ordovis's greatsword. Look along the blade as the Tarnished holds it aloft in the light of day. But ultimately, the real kicker of this theory, and of this video, is that if we accept this correlation between the Shadow Tree and the Crucible as true, then a whole lot of story elements become evident very quickly, resulting in a cascade of extrapolations and potential narrative direction. Once again, I feel that some of these extrapolations are simply too convenient and narrative-rich to ignore. So, in turn, I'm going to be going over what I believe this means for the rest of the Shadow of the Erdtree storyline, starting now. One question that may come to mind right away is, if this tree is the Crucible, then what happened to it? What caused that sap to spill forth like blood from an open wound? Well, remember, this DLC...
So, I don't want to like cut him off entirely, but since I think my perspective on it differs from him, I don't think I'm going to like be stepping on his toes. I hope not. My interpretation would be here that the rune of destined death was removed from the Elden Ring after the Age of Plenty, and I consider the Age of Plenty like the Age of the Crucible. So that kind of would align potentially with like the whole like Marika Messmer situation or Radagon situation, potentially like being parents. It could potentially align with like the loss of Godfrey, a transition into a new age that somehow predates the Shattering still, and kind of like makes the timeline work. So whether or not this is the Crucible itself, I'm not like I'm not completely sold on, because I think there's like enough like magical wackiness that it could like be anything narratively that they really desired, as far as I'm concerned. But I do think there is a good possibility that it could be something akin to the Crucible, but I wouldn't necessarily die on that hill.
Sap to spill forth like blood from an open wound. Well, remember, this DLC will concern itself with Miquella retracing the steps of Queen Marika in her ascent to godhood, and while we don't know exactly what that ascent entailed, it may not be unreasonable to believe that Marika would have tried to collect the essence of the Crucible for herself, in order to catalyze the process of becoming god.
Oh yeah, and I guess I should also mention that, I'm going to back it up a little bit further, that if this is the land in which the Erdtree was born, it's my opinion that the Erdtree is the Crucible, or that the Crucible is the Erdtree, so it would align with this guy's theory here that this could be the Crucible, because if the Erdtree was born here, and the Erdtree is the Crucible, then ipso facto, the Crucible was born in this land, and so you might be more likely to see the Crucible here as well.
entailed, it may not be unreasonable to believe that Marika would have tried to collect the essence of the Crucible for herself in order to catalyze the process of becoming God. After all, this tree, the Crucible, was likely the symbol of the age at the time, and if you're an Empyrean seeking to become God, what better way to create your symbol than by harvesting and utilizing the literal lifeblood of the very thing which you are to proceed? Remember how the Crucible is described as the primordial essence of the Erdtree? What if that's because the Erdtree was grown directly from the life-abundant essence of the Crucible to begin with? It explains a correlation that's otherwise rather difficult to reckon with, but it also may explain why Miquella is here too.
So to give a little bit of context, the way that I look at it is, if you consider Erdtree burial as being like burying the dead and their like souls or whatnot get sucked into the roots, it might also be like the real like fertilizer is like their blood and stuff. Who really knows? And so like the way that I look at it is the blending of the Crucible is essentially Erdtree burial, taking all of the souls of the dead and condensing them into like new forms, or maybe not like new forms, but condensed forms of life, which I think might be why you get things like misbegotten. And it's also why I think the ulcerated tree spirits have like little tendrils popping out of their like stomach areas, which I think are kind of analogous to Rykard, and like the little hands that come out of his abdomen. Tree spirit. I don't know if this shows it off super well. Oh yeah. Let me get rid of that for you guys. So these are like the little tendrils that I'm talking about. They're not completely hand-like at the very ends. Oh, cool, like little leaves or whatnot. So yeah, I won't count that one. I'm talking about like the smaller tendrils right here. Let me see if I have something with Rykard real quick. Rykard hands. This is actual hands. Maybe I only have footage of this. Wait, why is Windows Search working now? I'm not going to complain, it's just a little bit weird. Okay. So this is like Rykard's real hand after you kill him. Or no, maybe this is technically a snake hand. But anyway, you got like these little tendril things, which I think are reminiscent of what goes on with the ulcerated tree spirits. And I should have like a footage close-up of this as well. So that's paused. Hold on. Thought I had something a little bit better. Maybe I just took pictures. But anyway, hopefully like my point has been clear enough with that. You hadn't noticed that before? It's really easy to miss. Like, it took me a really long time to see the ulcerated tree spirits, just because, like, to be honest, they move around a lot. So unless you have like the camera mod or can like pause it, it's really easy to overlook. The lack of the texture on those tendrils is jarring. It's because like I had the footage stopped there. So yeah. Maybe. Oh, tendrils. Okay. Here we go. So yeah, like these like little glooby hands right here. Like they're not like real hands, but you know what I mean. Kind of reminiscent of what's going on with Rykard. And so I think this is like, if Rykard ate all these people to become his family and he's got all these like little hands coming out of him, then I think the Erdtree absorbing the dead is probably similar to what's going on with Rykard. Together.
In mind that of all the Empyreans of the modern age, including himself, his twin sister Malenia, Zoie the Witch, and now potentially Messmer by virtue of his parentage, Miquella is very likely the closest to attaining godhood, or at least was at some point. And a key part of that process seems to have been the creation of his own giant tree, the Tree, which Miquella is said to have watered with his own blood before encasing his very body within it to facilitate its full growth. In fact, fact, it may very well be that the only reason his ascension did not fully come to fruition was as a result of being cut from the Halig Tree and taken away by Mohg. However, in light of this theory, perhaps the Halig Tree was always destined to fail, as is perhaps suggested by the description of the Halig Tree Knight armor. There may have been a missing piece to his godhood, something that Miquella on his own had failed to identify, but which Mohg, perhaps through wisdom imparted on him by the Formless Mother, knew to be the amber sap of the Crucible in the Land of Shadow. We have reason to believe that Mohg has worked with Miquella extensively, and may have even been physically present with him in the Land of Shadow at some point, seeing as he emerges from a pool of blood issued from Miquella's shriveled arm, which was revealed in dialogue near the end of the DLC trailer and in Miyazaki's interview to be our gateway to accessing the Land of Shadow when the expansion launches. But perhaps most interestingly, it's also said on the Elden Ring website that in this DLC, Miquella awaits the return of his promised lord. So, could it be that Mohg shared Marika's secret to attaining godhood with Miquella in exchange for lordship in the coming age? If so, one can imagine the deal working to the advantage of everyone involved. Miquella is granted godhood, Mohg lordship, and the Formless Mother weasels her way into meddling with the Greater Will's plans, maybe even hijacking the Greater Will's hold on its own creations altogether. Who's to...
So I definitely don't hate this theory. I think it's very grounded in its approach. I just, it's one of those things where, like, I think it's definitely a good thought experiment, but I just don't have enough to make me fully be on board with it, but can certainly work if you want it to, I suppose.
To say. I believe that the exploration and the seeing through of these theoretical plot points will constitute the majority of the macroscopic story presented in Shadow of the Erdtree, but there are other details for which I have a hard time understanding their place in this puzzle, if I'm at all on the right track, that is. One such element is the war, which is mentioned as having happened sometime in the Land of Shadow's past by both the trailer and Miyazaki. I'm under the impression that given the potential direction we've outlined today, this war would necessarily be one fought between those who worshipped the Crucible and the earliest followers of Marika during her rise to power, perhaps in a bid to stop her from slicing open the great tree to harvest its essence, or perhaps the war took place after she'd already done this, and the Crucible devout were simply intent on making her pay for her sins. Maybe this explains the presence of the massive Wicker Man war machine, but then again, maybe not. There's also the matter of how the Land of Shadow came to be obscured as it is today, concerning both its separation from the Lands Between and the presence of this giant veil in the sky, which Miyazaki has made clear is an instrument used for keeping the Land of Shadow secret. While I don't really have an explanation for the physical disconnection of this location
literally
from the rest
veiled.
of the map, I am under the impression that this veil was deliberately created by Marika after or during her induction into godhood, in order to conceal the turbulent past of her ascension. For anyone who's watching that's familiar...
It's kind of funny because I haven't played this, but I'm going to this week. Damn, what was I going to say? I got distracted. Oh, yeah. So, like, with Mad Luigi's video that we watched right before this, I think you could potentially fashion a timeline. I don't know how, accurate it'll end up being, in that if you want to think of the Crucible as, like, the first form of the Erdtree, then the whole idea of burning the Erdtree to induct a new age could have specific relevance to what's going on. And with that in mind, you have the whole war potentially coinciding with quote-unquote hounding Godfrey from the Lands Between. There's enough, like, weird ambiguity with that where I have, like, a lot of unanswered questions with, like, him being divested of grace versus the light in his eyes fading, like, passively and all that stuff, and or who exactly the Stormlord was. There's enough where you can kind of, like, get out of it what you want to see, and this is kind of like where I bring up, like, the analogy of, like, Rorschach type lore, where, like, there's an ink blot, you see what you want to see essentially, and, like, it works for you, but it might not work for anybody else. So where was I going with that? Oh, right. So, like, if the Crucible was the first form of the Erdtree, then burning the Erdtree might be necessary to instate, like, the second Elden Lord in the form of Radagon, but Radagon's institution of Golden Order fundamentalism, if you want to call it that specifically, is supposed to be like perfect and eternal. And if you have a perfect and eternal system, you might not need to burn the Erdtree ever again. So it could be like this weird situation where like, okay, the old order needs to go. You're now under new management. We don't need this like contingency plan because this is like the perfect order. And then that might have like led into like the whole Shadow Realm situation. But of course, this is super heavy speculation that could just potentially try to make the timeline work for like the purposes of this video here, I suppose. You haven't played it yet either? Nice. Otoako, welcome in. Earliest followers of America. Closed captions still crack you up to this day. Yeah, they're pretty great. And then Dago said earlier, Hayata referring to the one great and Rykard wanting to eat everything. There does seem to be a theme of absorbing stuff. The greater will's an amoeba theory. Haven't heard that one yet.
To godhood, in order to conceal the turbulent past of her ascension. For anyone who's watching that's familiar with the lore of Hollow Knight, I think an apt comparison is the door.
I was trying to swig some water, so I'm just going to like fast forward here because I'm literally going to play a Hollow Knight for the first time this week and don't need to know that. Okay.
Considered a threat to the monotheistic view that she wishes to impose upon her subjects. In other words, if anyone could plainly see for themselves the path she took to attaining divinity, well, the illusion of the great Marika the Eternal becomes a lot less believable and powerful. But the one element of this trailer that I simply cannot make heads or tails of here is, of course, Messmer the Impaler. It's not that I think his presence here really confirms nor denies anything we've spoken of today, but simply that he's a bit of a wild card. At the beginning of this video, I highlighted how hypocritical his intentions seem to be. One of the final pieces of dialogue in the trailer states,
"Those stripped of the grace of gold shall all meet death in the embrace of Messmer's flame."
which seems to very clearly indicate that Messmer slays those who do not abide by Marika's rule. And yet, look at him. Fire, snakes, potentially even dragon communion, as evidenced by his eye. This guy is just about as sinful and damnable as they come in the eyes of the Golden Order. So, I don't know. I'm thinking of exploring Messmer.
I mean, there's a lot of parallels one could potentially make to like, oh man, I probably shouldn't get into this. But like Lucifer in like, the whole idea that if Lucifer is a creation of God and whatnot, maybe I should like specify like the Christian God, or anyway, like if he is like the perfect creation of the Christian God and whatnot, could Lucifer like really objectively like truly oppose God, or is he working in accordance with God's plans and all that stuff? And so like you may be able to say like Messmer's role here might be like to punish the non-believers, I guess, or like those who would go against like the God's will. But I don't necessarily think that angle really works with the game, and I've wondered whether or not like the goal of the Tarnished was to be like to make like maybe a weird example to be like the worker bees of Queen Marika. Maybe their goal is to go out and kill things to like absorb their runes, their life essence, whatever you want to call it. And then when they die, they kind of get returned to the Erdtree because they're like given grace, and like grace has hold on them and whatnot. And so they can like induct things into the Erdtree burial. And I think that idea might work with, what do we call it? I always forget this. The Lowlanders rune, the current Lowlanders rune of the game, where it says, no, this is cut content. Anyway, with the cut content in that grace is brought to the very fringes and lowlands of the lands between, and with the Erdtree came the weight of its history, a history of conquest and subjugation. Wait, no, there's another one. It's blessing of the Erdtree. Or Erdtree heal, one of those two. Nope, Erdtree heal, it's got to be. Blessing's boon. Okay. No, what am I thinking of? Hold on. It's on like the tip of my tongue. I just need to remember the text. Not conquest and subjugation. became the embodiment of order. Okay. Protection of the Erdtree. Okay. In the beginning, everything was in opposition to the Erdtree, but through countless victories in war, it became the embodiment of order. This is very fascinating to me because this implies that the Erdtree, and therefore the Elden Ring, didn't necessarily embody order completely at the birth of the Erdtree if everything was opposed to it in the beginning. So hopefully that makes sense. Let me put that over there. Okay. Yeah, and El Gusto says, that is a theory. Lucifer and Judas were all according to plan. Yeah, I didn't necessarily want to open up that can of worms entirely, but I think that parallel can be apt, depending on, like, Even Baron? Everbaron's, Everbaron. I don't know how you stress it, with this kind of, like, reading here. Messmer dipping into forbidden power to assist in punishing Marika's enemies could work. It might be forbidden to the masses, but with like I think there must be one incantation, which I don't remember what it is, and I don't remember the text to look it up super quickly. But Aeneas says that like the flames of ruin are not the domain of mere men. Well, Messmer is no mere man. That's right. He's a Nazgul. No, not really, but. This is all Lord of the Rings, maybe. I'm surprised you didn't say Fist of the North Star there, Chadwick. Right. Scally said, like, he got too lost in the sauce and started acquiring heretical abilities, which resulted in his banishment. Maybe the ring and the Erdtree became the symbols of order through the conquest of everyone else. So it's possible, and I mean, like, I don't really fully believe this. I just think, like, based off the lore that we have, you could cobble together the idea that Marika sending the Tarnished out of the lands between could be so that they die. Are they all supposed to die to Messmer? Is he like, the Satan of the lands between? Maybe. I don't really think that's supposed to work, but I suppose it's like not directly contradicted anywhere that I'm aware of right now. You wonder why they call him Messmer the Impaler rather than the Penetrator? Because that's a Demon Souls boss, silly.
And some of my thoughts about him specifically within a dedicated video before the DLC releases, so let me know if you'd like to see that. But overall, I believe the story that's being hinted at with him is extremely cool, though I'm not sure it has a ton of overall bearing on what we've discussed today specifically. Truth be told though, that's pretty much everything I've got for you today. I have no doubt that some of what I've posited may be contentious, or that many may not be inclined to believe it, at least not so quickly, and that's perfectly fine. Although
boy, do I feel that.
I know I kind of framed it in a dramatic way in the title and in the thumbnail and in the introduction, and ultimately it's just what kind of machination.
Honestly, I thought it was all like pretty grounded, and that helps set up expectations. So I honestly didn't see any issue with it whatsoever. Like I felt like his his use of language throughout this has been very meticulous and as calculated as it could be. I definitely commend his efforts there, even if I ultimately have some contextual disagreements, and hopefully I'll be able to convert him to my side.
Have come to my mind as a result of this 3-minute long trailer, and in earnest, all I want is for this to be some fun food for thought. I'm not really trying to sell anybody on anything. Truthfully, at this point in the video, I'm thankful to anyone who's decided to stick around, whether you thought what I was saying was plausible or not. And I hope that my ramblings at least gave you something to think about before Shadow of the Erdtree drops this summer. So?
And that's always the fun of trying to just encourage a broader discussion surrounding the game.
Whether you've got something you'd like to add, or if you think I got something wrong or overlooked a piece of evidence, then I want to hear about it all the same. It helps me continue to grow and hone my research into Elden Ring lore so that I can present more of this type of content to you in the future. And what a future that's looking like it's turning out to be. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more lore and theory-related content regarding not just Elden Ring, but a whole host of other games and IPs, new and old, then maybe consider subscribing. I've got an eclectic mix of content here for anyone looking to expand their horizons with lore stemming from all kinds of different places, and I hope you'll take some time to check some of that stuff out if you find it interesting. I've got a lot more content on the way too, and I gotta say, leading up to this summer, we've got an exciting ride ahead of us, so I'm really looking forward to sharing that with all of you. Anyway, that's going to do it from me, so until next time, this is Averberon. I'll see you again soon, and have a good one.
Averberon. Okay, that's not how I would have expected it. Averberon. Wait, how did he say that?
Looking forward to sharing that with all of you. Anyway, that's going to do it from me, so until next time, this is Averberon. I'll see you again soon, and have a good one.
Averberon. Okay, like a schwa at the front. Okay, no, I really enjoyed that video, even though it sent me on my like normal soapbox tangent. Hopefully that wasn't too redundant for you guys, but you know, pretty passionate about this stuff, and hopefully you all like gained something out of it, which is kind of always the goal. I just feel bad for all of you who are like regulars of the chat who've like heard it 1,000 times by this point. But anyway, yeah, I enjoyed that quite a bit. I'm going to check out what else he has on his channel. Unexplained Elden Ring enemies. Every soul's ending explained.
Since the beginning of
Flame of Frenzied. Okay, yeah, I'll go ahead and sub and maybe check out some of these videos another date. So let's go ahead and link his video into chat right here. If you guys want to give him a like or sub as well. It was an enjoyable video. Okay, so with that being said, I'm thinking of watching Elden Enthusiast's video in chat tomorrow. I'll need to like queue that up. It's going to be a long one. I think his video is like an hour and 30 minutes long or something like that. So that might end up being the only video I watch tomorrow. And then potentially doing Hollow Knight the night after that, which would be Thursday. So today is technically Tuesday. Yeah, so it would be Thursday, the 2nd of May. I might begin Hollow Knight, and if not Thursday, potentially Friday. We'll see how things go, but I'm leaning towards Thursday for now, if that works for you guys. And or if you guys are like dying for me to like watch something that you want to get my input on or like want to discuss more, feel free to like leave those in the Discord channel feedback channel, or go ahead and comment a video that you want me to watch on like this video directly, so that way I'll remember to look at it sometime. So, all right, with that being said, that'll be it for tonight. Definitely went way over time than I thought I was going to. I'm going to leave a comment on this video telling him that I like reacted to it, so that way he can see my reaction and get my feedback and whatnot. So, yeah, maybe we can connect. For all of you who've joined, as always, thank you so much for your participation. Hopefully we'll catch you on the next one, going live again today, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So till then, stay safe, take care. Last Protagonist out.